Chapter 560. A soft murmur was heard, ringing in everyone's ears like a ghost. That soft murmur was like a sigh, without any emotions. There was no ridicule nor ridicule, because every single word that Yiqing Luo said was the truth. Among the crowd, Yiqing Luo used that strange footwork as fast as lightning. Only a red glow could be seen jumping around like a fire elf. In just 2 mouthfuls of tea's time, Yiqing Luo forcefully broke through the encirclement and under everyone's astonished gazes, her hand grabbed hold of Yuqi Peng, not to mention the others. Even Yuqi Peng himself had not regained his senses. He originally wanted to see how Yiqing Luo was surrounded, but he had not expected that this human wave tactic in front of Yiqing Luo was so weak that it couldn't even withstand a single blow. Finished. Yuqi family's patriarch and Yuqi Peng were both shocked. The former felt that he had lost all face, while the latter had to consider his own life. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers clasped tightly onto Yuqi Peng's wrist. The other hand was holding onto that feather fan, intentionally or unintentionally placed it in between the both of them. At this distance, not to mention using weapons, even if she didn't, just based on Yiqing Luo's fingertip profound chi, it was enough to exterminate Yuqi Peng. Those elite guards felt a chill down their spines as they stared at Yiqing Luo, shrieked in terror, in disbelief. The pain from the fall was totally a small matter, but if she were to ruin her meticulously dressed Yiqing Luo, then the loss would even stronger. But the pain that she imagined, this degree of strength, was her body fell not just into a warm embrace. That embrace was incomparably wide. It was simply like a yellow, profound. She seemed to be able to feel the warmth from the leaping to a sky mystic. A sandalwood fragrance 1 month ago. Nostrils. Yiqing Luo, under the subconsciously opened her eyes and relied on the 2 Mu brothers before she glance met with a pair of sparkling but today blossom in front of thousands, as though it was a whirlpool. She used a simple and crude method to restrain the face that entered her eyes. Yuqi family's patriarch was still by his side and hadn't reacted in time. That showed how powerful Yiqing added a unique charm to that. At this moment, Yuqi Peng's forehead heart suddenly started to beat as a sliver of regret. Her eyes were filled with shyness as she put on a smile. He shouldn't have provoked Yiqing Luo, beautiful as both her hands wrapped around his neck. This consequence was much more tragic than what he had expected. Little brother. Yuqi Peng was an idiot, and before he came, he had gone through a series of opened her mouth when her body suddenly turned light. The Yuqi family had called over 1,000 guards to surround Lanling under everyone's watchful eyes. Father directly blamed, totally unable to believe that there would actually be a man who rejected her. He had obviously caught her. Wasn't it to be a hero, saving at the very least, he had to deal with the Yuqi family. Actually pushed her away. Lanling Nua's eyes were filled with astonishment. So wouldn't a little girl be scared out of her wits? Feel that However, the actual result made Yuqi Peng feel terrified. He was expressionless as he watched her fall under the current circumstances. Yuqi Peng didn't dare Lanling Nua as though he was infected. Absolutely composure that he pulled out a hand to suppress the anger. Yiqing Luo, DMO, she pinched herself hard at this moment, and the minute Yuqi Peng finally understood that moment, what number 4 Lanling Nua fell onto the ground. It wasn't that old fool was strong. It wasn't that those elite surrounding tears rolled down the ground. It was because this woman was too strong. This tumble caused those choking sounds she saw silently made clothes to be ripped open. Bastard, let go of our young sound. Cried as she how dare you attack from her shoulders in her pink underwear. What gall? Calling out the Yuqi patriarch, her meticulously bundled hair. She didn't say a single word. She kept calling under the strands of hair ripped off. Jitsong Tian's body, tensed up. Yiqing Luo was actually this fiercely. He gritted his teeth, ran up, cried out, and this was the woman still not going to surrender. The woman whom perhaps our Yuqi fan looked down, but had he could see the beautiful figure. The guards beside him under the wall started to open their mouths. How could he not be Yiqing Luo? When they saw the woman whom he loved opening his throat moved as though the person whom he's thinking of that mercenary group was their and removed his outer robe. A layer of ice surfaced. Chapter 560. Yiqing Luo swept a glance at the Yuqi family's guards, angry that her entire body, revealing a 70 battered face. I've seen a lot of it to the extent, but I've never seen anyone Tian never seen patriarchy. Even if she knew, he was momentarily stunned. In her eyes, which was I get scared and accidentally injure young master. Yiqing Luo led the world group The moment Patriarch Yuchi heard this, the minute they entered, his entire heart was suspended. The surrounding atmosphere, he couldn't figure out Yiqing Luo's route. The air seemed to be filled with a damp. Everything that had happened had exceeded those youngsters who were originally talking about that mercenary group. Really used some carelessness and talking about that arrogant mercenary group as an excuse to claim stop talking under this strange atmosphere. Then his Yuchi family, one by one, would really become a joke. Subconsciously, although his eldest son's right hand was vigilantly and he was already half a cripple. Everything here was giving off a dangerous vibe. But after all, it was different from the relaxed that she had raised with a fourth level and below. How could she not have everywhere here was filled now that his son's life was in someone else's hands? Even their breathing. Patriarch Yuchi wouldn't remember your motive to act blindly here, without thinking. No matter how capable suppressed her voice as her vision, the Yuchi family's reputation could not be tarnished. For those unimportant, the master of the Yuchi family, before the mission is completed in his heart, and tried to make his voice after the mission is completed as possible. I won't stop you, however you want to play with them. This time, towards the Blue Dragon to resolve our conflict. If the world group's youngsters really wanted to let go of my son first, Yiqing Luo wouldn't stop them because words were spoken very carefully. What's more, and he put on a look that the world group's youngsters would have a battle. At the very least, they had to make the surrounding crowd. He had to prioritize his priorities. Wasn't afraid of trouble. But that they had no choice but to they had to sacrifice the world groups. The head of the Yuchi family was causing them to be unable to complete in his imagination the high-level missions. The person who should be begging for mercy should be the world mercenary group itself. However, have the advantage. He was surrounded by thousands of guards. If they were to sacrifice their only sent out Yiqing Luo totally no need, and he was helpless. The youngster's eyes lit up. Patriarch Yuchi had lived for most of his life. As they completed the mission, but this was the first time they would be able to teach something like this. Yiqing Luo almost burst out facing the youngster's hopeful gazes. That pair of long and narrow chose to ignore them as she intentionally didn't. But there was also a trace of mockery. And she looked at Long Only now did she know how to speak group leader. What's our mission now? 10 missions. Who was the one who was so aggressive and voice said that she was a heinous woman with a 7 missions heart. Are to kill high-level magical beasts. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about Yuchi family's patriarch and bone. As she lifted Yuchi Peng's lapel, we need 2 wolf curls into a chilly smile. And we need wolf teeth staring straight at 3 bear beasts. What kind of deal did the entire bear beast make with the dark? Not a single part. Thinking back to the master, there's another one that's more difficult. And looking at now, the mercenary union has specifically suggested that flatly denied the matter regarding which is to kill 2 goshawks. How could Yiqing Luo all dumbfounded not understand? Their legs froze on the spot that the dark forces wanted to completely seal a high-level magical beast. Are you sure you're not? This also meant that the dark forces were not strong enough to appear in front of eagle beasts. They still had to hide in the dark and slowly expand not their to mention forces. 7. Now, even if just the news of the dark forces had already spread to they would Yuchi probably family suffer from Yuchi Peng's furthermore. Naturally, to kill the other aristocratic families had also heard about the goshawk forces capable of. Souls. That was a bird. If the underworld forces wanted to disassociate themselves from the youths gulped nervously. They would have to start a long while. They finally found their voices based on the sinister and vicious dark forces. What about the other 3 missions? Would dig out the herbs at the edge of the gap between the 5th when Yuchi Peng heard her question. As soon as this mission was announced, went blank. The youth's faces immediately became lifeless. You're still trying to lie to me. Quests. What dark forces? Deadly quests. The dark forces have. Don't look at how easy it was to dig up the medicinal to expel the Nirvana. The key was you're still trying to use the dark forces as an excuse to kill me. That was the place where magical beasts were most likely to appear. Chapter 5, especially in the magical Yuchi Peng was stunned. All the medicinal herbs were under the control. But he was not willing to say a single word. He would rather dig the medicinal herbs. This was Yuchi Peng's attitude. The magical beast Luo's brows rose. Looked like if Yuchi Peng mentioned about the dark forces, he might have to bear a consequence. 7 was even more terrifying. Yiqing Luo's eyes were at the very least. The Yuchi family would be buried all these missions. The dark forces did not make a deal with Yuchi Peng. If they were to split into 5, I've never seen any dark forces, and I don't know what you're talking about. What dark forces? Possible. What's high-level magical beasts? All of this is just an excuse for you to take revenge. Not just a difference of one. You deliberately used the dark forces that have long been banished from the upper realm as an excuse to chop off my hand and destroy the Yuchi family. 7 high-level magical beasts. Yuchi Peng bit his lips tightly as he stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. Why don't we do the same mission together? Giving a heart-wrenching splitting them up was not those who didn't know what was going on, but to the youngsters likely believed it to be true. For example,
60 over
the
people
Yuchi
working
guards who
together
didn't know
to
what was
deal
going
with
on.
one high-level
From what they
magical
saw,
beast.
Yi Qing
As
Luo
long as there was
was
a
taking
good
revenge
command
on
on
their
their
eldest young
the
master,
efficiency
which
would
would be
simply
much higher
too
than
abominable.
splitting them up to hunt
After
the
all,
magical beasts.
they had only heard about
Long
the Dark
Yun John
Coalition
nodded.
from their seniors.
This way, it's
They were the
beneficial to
aliens that
train
had been banished
everyone's
from the Nirvana
coordination.
realm.
The
How could the
youngsters
dark
naturally
forces
didn't
appear
have
again?
any
No
opinion
one
on the
believed
method,
it.
which group
Facing
leader
Yuchi
and
Peng's
assistant
attitude,
group leader had
Yi
discussed.
Qing Luo
Moreover,
instantly
working
sneered.
together in a team
Good, very
was
good.
indeed safer.
Since you insist
and it
I want
could
to take
nurture
revenge,
everyone's rapport.
cut off your hand.
Everyone on the
and
fifth
bear
level
this
didn't
infamy
dare
for no
to act
reason.
like what they did.
Then I
on the
might as
fourth
well
level,
make it true.
swaggering in
in
the
front of everyone.
forest.
I'll accept
not
your
fearing
hand.
the magical
His
beasts
voice
at
had
all.
just fallen
Everyone walked
when a red light
extremely
suddenly
carefully.
appeared.
The
and
youngsters
headed
with
straight
higher
for one of
perceptive
Yuchi
sense
Peng's
and
hands.
faster speed
At this moment,
led the way in front,
Yi Qing
while the
Luo's
60
heart
over
was
youngsters
as calm
calm
as
as
water.
water.
Whereas
At
Yi
first,
Qing
they heard
Luo
Yuchi
and the
Peng's
rest
nonsense
walked at the back of the crowd.
and the Yuchi clan's
The few of them didn't
overbearing
say a
attitude.
single word,
Deep
but
in her
carefully
heart,
sized
she
up
was
these
still
youngsters'
somewhat
expressions.
angry. With such
As
a
well as their
great
vigilance
injustice
and reaction
pinned on her
facing
head,
danger.
no one would feel
Occasionally,
good when
but
they
Yi
saw
Qing
some rare
Luo
medicinal
instantly calmed
herbs.
down.
Yi
It
Qing
doesn't matter if
Luo
she was
and
wrong
Beiming Lu
or if she
Lu
was being
would drop out of the
scolded
group since
and
Yuchi
quietly
Peng had the
harvest
guts
them.
to bring
The
people
duo's
over to
coordination
cause trouble.
wasn't
Then
too
she would have
bad
the
as
ability
they
to
didn't
cause any
In this way, it
disturbances
could be
among the
considered
magical
as getting
beasts.
rid of a
In
scourge
the process
and
of heading
avoiding
towards the
a lot of
mission,
trouble.
they
It was just some
harvested over
infamy.
10 types
She
of
didn't care
medicinal
what the
herbs.
Yuchi family thought
Following
of her.
that, they
Since
caught
it was
up
like
with the group.
this.
The
The
mission
mission
to
to
kill
directly chop
two
off
wolf
Yuchi
beasts
Peng's
was
hand
considered
and let him know
as the
that people
easiest among the three
cannot
types
be
of magical
casually
beasts.
made up.
But the moment
The
the
youngsters
red light
expressed
erupted,
the Yuchi
immense
family's
pressure.
patriarch reacted
High-level wolf
quickly
beasts
and
were
wanted to
around the
stop it.
size.
However,
of an adult
before he
tiger.
could even make a move,
Their fangs were sharp,
Yi Qing
and their
Luo's
claws were
penetrative
sharp,
gaze
especially
shot
their speed
right
was
over as the
extremely
palm wind
fast.
moved.
Most
Striking out a
importantly,
burst of
wolf
palm
beasts
chi
were pack
towards
animals.
Patriarch Yuchi's
They had no
direction.
way to attract
Patriarch
a single
Yuchi
wolf
did
beast
not dare
to
to
one
be
side
careless.
for hunting.
This palm of chi
Once one
clearly
wolf
did
beast
not
was
contain
attracted,
any strong
the rest of the
chi.
wolf beasts would instantly rush
But
over.
just the
By
aura
then,
that erupted in an instant
if they were
was
surrounded
enough
by
to shock
10
him.
over
If
high-level
Yuchi
wolf
family's
beasts,
patriarch
it wouldn't be
avoided this
them
palm
hunting
wind,
the wolf
then he would
beasts,
lose
but
the
the
chance
wolf
to stop
beasts
Yi
would be
Qing
preying
Luo
on them.
from ruining
Wolf
his son's
beasts
other
have their
hand.
own territory.
But if he wanted to stop
as
Yi
long as
Qing
we
Luo,
lure the
then he would have to
high-ranked
forcefully
wolf
take
beasts
on this
out of their
palm strike.
territory.
Even if
then
he
we can
didn't
make our
die,
move.
he would at least have a layer of skin peeled off.
The other
What Yi
high-ranked
Qing
wolf
Luo wanted was
beasts
this
won't
effect.
be able to rush
Didn't the
over.
patriarch
Yi
of the
Qing
Yuchi
Luo
family
recalled that in
want
the
to put on
books
a
which he
show
had
of
read at Ghost Doctor's
compromising
Place,
for his son?
it had recorded
this
this
part
part
of the magic
He was
beast
obviously
forest,
afraid that the
because
Yuchi
there were
family
many
would
rare
lose all
medicinal
face,
herbs,
but he
in
had to
fifth
use
level.
such a
The
lofty
book
emotion like
specifically
family
recorded the
to cover
method
it up.
of
He
obtaining
was simply
medicinal
destroying
herbs.
the word
It was specially
family.
marked that the
Did patriarch
magical beasts of the
Yuchi
fifth
really
level
dote on his
all
own
had
son?
their own
The
territories.
so-called doting
If an alchemist
was it really
was
not
discovered
mixed
by a
with any
territory's
benefits?
magical beast while picking medicinal herbs,
Chapter
all the magical beasts in the
563.
territory
Yuchi
would attack.
family's patriarch
However,
indeed,
if they
didn't let
escaped from the
Yi Qing
territory
Luo
of the
down.
magical beast,
Facing the incoming
pursuing
palm
magical
wind,
beast would give
Yuchi
up
family's
on their
patriarch
pursuit.
turned
Of course,
sideways.
The beast
and
tide was
evaded it.
not an
But
unstable factor.
Yuchi family's
When
patriarch
Long
still
Yun
had to
John
put up
heard
front.
that,
After
his
he
handsome
evaded it
brows
sideways,
creased slightly.
he speedily
as his
flew
azure blue
towards
eyes
Yuchi
revealed
Peng's
some
direction.
puzzlement.
But
As though he
how could
didn't
he make it in
understand
time?
how Yi Qing
Oh no,
Luo knew
Yuchi
about the
Peng
matters
realized
regarding
the
the
situation,
magical beast
and his
territory.
heart instantly
When the other
turned
youths
into
heard
ashes.
this,
They saw
he was still
Beiming
hoping that his
Yin
father would
Cheng's
lend a helping
eager
hand.
expression.
But now it
Group
looked like
leader,
he was dead.
Vice
meat.
group leader,
If he was
let
still
me
the
try.
proud son of
The
heaven,
youth's face
perhaps
was
his
filled
father
with excitement
might not
and
fear the
agitation.
danger to save
He did
him.
not cower,
But now
would try to be
he
brave
had
at
lost
all.
his worth.
He
How
exuded
could his
an
father
aura of
possibly hurt
confidence.
himself just to save him? Yuchi Peng's heart was trembling. Why did he offend this
Chapter
woman?
578.
Yuchi Peng looked at Yi
Beiming
Qing
Yin
Luo
Cheng's
in
skills
despair.
weren't bad at all.
As he was
After
terrified
coming out from
momentarily.
Death God Castle,
He couldn't struggle.
He had consecutively
he could only
risen by
watch as the
2
profound
levels,
chi
and his
in
skills had
Yi Qing
become
Luo's
even more
hand
agile.
moved directly
After
towards
obtaining
his left
Long
wrist.
Yun John's
He couldn't
permission,
help but
he
let
leapt
out a
up
miserable
and burrowed
shriek into the bushes.
But at this critical
in a
moment,
blink of an eye,
a burst of
he had already lost
profound
track of
chi
him.
directly presence
flew
seemed to have
towards
disappeared.
Yi Qing
The youngsters
Luo's
searched
direction.
for a long
Yi
time
Qing
and
Luo
released their
narrowed her
senses.
eyes,
They
but
couldn't
didn't
sense
counterattack,
Biming
nor
Lian
did she
Cheng's
evade.
presence at all, because
Yi
this
Qing
burst
Luo
of profound
nodded her
chi
head satisfactorily.
Yi Qing Luo
No wonder
didn't
Biming
sense
Lian
any
Cheng
malicious
dared to
intent
volunteer himself,
and was even
so he
vaguely
had this
familiar.
ability.
But this
He was
burst
able
of
to conceal
profound
his presence
chi came
completely,
too suddenly.
blending
If it wasn't
into
for the
one
fact that she
with
had
the
detected
surrounding
the
environment.
source of this profound
Like a chameleon,
chi, and
he was able to
intentionally
conceal
diverted
himself
the profound
at all
chi's
times
energy.
Biming
towards
Lian
Yuchi
Cheng hid in the
that
dark
person who
as he
came
kept
forward to
nearing the
obstruct her
wolf pack.
would probably
Not
have
too
to pay a
long
price.
later,
He saw
Not to the
10
extent
overwolf
of serious
beasts gathering
injury,
by the stream,
but skin
to drink
injuries
water.
were inevitable.
The stream
Qing
flowed
Luo
down from the
showed
7th
some
level
mercy
all the
from
way
afar.
to the 1st level.
A clear voice
There were
was
only
heard,
2
and a
such
blue
streams
figure
in
was
the
approaching
entire
from
magic
afar.
beast forest.
And behind
for the
that
magic
figure,
beast to draw
another
water
figure
from.
followed closely.
10 overwolf
In a
beasts
blink of
would
an eye,
raise their heads
the
from
two of
time
them
to
had
time
already stopped
as their
in front of
mouths
Yi
gave
Qing
out
Luo.
sharp howls.
Zifan,
After howling for a
Zifei,
while,
why are you
they
guys
bent
here?
over to drink water.
Yi Qing Luo,
groping around,
raised her eyes
after
in
about half an
astonishment
instant
as she
time,
stared at the
those 10
extraordinarily
overwolf
handsome
beasts
face
left
in front of
in a
her.
group.
These
Just
two
at this
people were
moment,
none
the
other
last
than the Wu
wolf
family's
beast's
two
howl
brothers,
as its entire
Mu
body was
Zifan
flung out
and Mu
fiercely.
Zifei.
That
Ever
wolf
since
beast,
Yi
which was
Qing
the size of
Luo
a tiger,
entered Heavenly
directly
Academy,
broke a
she
thick
hadn't
and
seen
sturdy
these
tree.
two people.
These two
Waves
people
and waves of
seemed to be
wolf
high
howls
profound
rang
class
continuously.
But in
The
the
wolf
academy,
pack's sharp eyes
Yi
looked
Qing
around
Luo
as
had
their
never
noses
seen them
twitched,
before.
but they
The
didn't
Mu
smell
brothers were
anything
burning with
strange
anxiety
nearby.
at this time.
Nor did
The
they
news of the
smell
Yuchi
any
family
dangerous
surrounding
presence.
a new
After howling
mercenary
for some
group
time,
with their guards had
eventually
already
these wolf
spread
beasts
throughout
all
Three
gave
Spring
up.
City.
But that
The
wolf
two brothers
beast
were
which was
arranging
flung
the
out
medicinal
suddenly opened
herbs
its
in the
eyes
pristine
as it
elixir
revealed an
medicine hall.
ominous
When they heard
glint
the customers
as its
who
mouth
came to
opened
purchase the
wide,
medicinal herbs
revealing
mentioned that the
sharp
vice
fangs.
leader of the
Its
mercenary
huge
group
fat
was
body
Yi Qing Luo.
slowly got up from
When the two of them heard this,
Following
they
that,
immediately
its gaze
rushed
stared
over.
towards a certain
As expected,
direction in the
he
depths
saw
of
Yi
the
Qing
forest
Luo.
as its body
Back
shot
then,
out like an
he had
arrow
collaborated
as it
with
charged
Yi Qing
forward.
Luo.
The
to
pack
teach
of
Yuchi
wolf
a
beasts
lesson.
behind didn't understand what was going
That
on.
was because he had an
By the time
honorable
they wanted to
reason
catch up
to
with their
make sure that the
companions'
Yuchi
footsteps,
family
they had
would
already
not
lost
have
sight
any
of
chance
that
of
wolf
revenge.
beast.
Yi
But
Qing Luo,
if Yi
and the
Qing
rest stood at
Luo
their
were to make a
original
move
spots,
now,
waiting
and
for
destroy
Bai
Yu
Ming
Lian's
Lian's
other hand,
everyone was curious.
then she would really
what
form
method
an
would
enmity
Bai Ming
with the
Lian
Yuchi family.
use
The
to
Mu
lure
brothers
one
didn't
wolf
deny
beast over?
that Yi Qing
At this
Luo's
moment,
ability
a figure
was
suddenly
indeed
sprang out
very
from the
strong.
bushes.
She wasn't
At the same
afraid of the
time,
Yuchi family,
Yi Qing
but that
Luo
was only
shouted,
because
"Spread
she
out,
wasn't afraid
surround
of
them."
Yi
The
Qing
youngsters in the
Luo's
world
current
group had
foundation
long
wasn't
developed the
stable,
habit
and if she
of
really made a
moving
move today,
subconsciously
destroying
when they
Yuchi
heard
Peng's
orders.
left hand.
Upon
Not to
hearing
mention
Yi
chopping off
Qing
Yuchi
Luo's
Peng's
command,
right hand,
everyone
was it to prevent
swiftly
Yuchi Peng from
dispersed,
being devoured by
forming
the
an
dark
encirclement.
forces. Even if it was
wolf
the
beast
dead of this
leaped
left hand
into their encirclement,
the Yuchi family
what was
would
going
probably
on?
not let it go. Then, the Yuchi
It
family
really
had
was a
no
wolf
way to
beast,
deal
a lone
with
wolf
Yi
beast?
Qing Luo.
Why are you still
So they
in
would
a
start
day's
with the
attack?
people around
Yi
Yi
Qing
Qing
Luo's
Luo.
cold voice
The first to
rang
bear
out
the brunt
sharply.
was the
Only then
world
did the
mercenary
youths
group,
come to their senses.
especially the youngsters.
They
in the
gripped the
mercenary
weapons
group.
in their hands.
Some of them weren't
and
even a
began to
match
attack
for the
the
Yuchi
wolf
family's
beast.
guards. Xiao Jin and Yin Xiao Yi commanded while Yi
Chapter
Qing Luo
564.
retreated to one side.
Yi Qing
She
Luo.
looked at Bai Ming
Let's
Lian
talk this
Shan,
out.
who was
There must be a
wiping sweat.
misunderstanding
There was still a
somewhere.
trace of shock
Mu
on his face,
Zifan's brows
but when he saw the
creased
youth's
tightly
kill that
as
wolf
he suppressed
beast
his
together,
voice to persuade
his
her.
eyes were filled
Whoever
with
knew that
satisfaction.
before Yi Qing
Yi
Luo
Qing
could
Luo's
open her
pink
mouth,
lips curled
Yuchi
slightly
family's
as she walked
patriarch
over
angrily
and
opened
lightly
his
patted
mouth.
his shoulder.
Mu family's
Yin
two
Xiang,
young
you've done
masters.
well.
Today's
This
matter has
encouragement
nothing to
was
do with you.
extremely
Please
light,
move aside.
extremely
He clenched
slow,
his fists
and
tightly
contained a
as
tinge
his
of
face was
gentleness.
filled with
Bai
anger.
Ming Lian
That pair
Sheng's
of
body,
dignified and
stiffened
sinister
as the
eyes
hand
were
which
burning
was wiping
with
his
raging
sweat
flames.
squatted on his forehead.
Earlier from Yi
He turned his
Qing
head
Luo's
and met
action.
with Yi Qing
How would the cunning
Luo's
Yuchi family's
smiling
patriarch
eyes not understand her motive? This woman was simply hateful. If it wasn't for the timely
Chapter
appearance of the Mu
579.
brothers, she had
His
to admit
old face
that
would
Bai
have been
Ming
thrown
Lian
away.
Sheng's reaction
If
was
he didn't tear this
fast,
woman into
and
pieces
he
today,
was an intelligent person.
how would he be able to take this
After Yi
lying
Qing
down?
Luo got
Yi
closer
Qing
to
Luo.
him,
She
she
once
once
destroyed
destroyed
my
my
fourth
medicinal
son
herb
without
smell
any
any
explanation.
This smell was
Now,
what she
you
smelled
want to destroy
when they
my
passed by the
eldest
other
son as
beast
well.
clan's territory.
You want to destroy the entire
Yi Qing Luo
Yuchi family?
roughly guessed the method.
His eyes were
which
chilly
Bai
as
Ming
his tone was
Lian
filled
used.
with grief.
The wolf
and
beast just
interrogation.
now must have been
Are you trying to
attracted by
destroy
smell
the
of
four
herbs.
great
Yi
families
Qing
one by
Luo
one?
patted
While
his shoulder
speaking,
once again.
Yuchi
as she
family's
revealed
patriarch
a gentle
intentionally
smile.
casted
Go
a
on.
sidelong glance
Bai Ming
at
Lian
the Mu
Sheng's
brothers,
eyes,
as though to
shone
remind them
slightly
that Yi Qing
as he nodded
Luo
his head
had ill
vigorously,
intentions.
and immediately
When his hat was
dived
pinned
into the bushes
Yi
to search
Qing
for the
Luo
next
laughed
wave of
out
wolf
loud.
pack.
No
This
wonder
method
he was
could
one of the
only be
maybe
four
used
great
once
families
for the same
patriarch.
wave of wolf
His
pack.
reaction was just
Otherwise,
so
the second
fast.
time,
Not
these
long
magical
after,
beasts,
he had
which had
already
their own
thought of a
consciousness,
reason
would
to
definitely
retaliate.
discover something
In just a few
amiss.
words,
Yi
he had
Qing
pushed
Luo
Yi
turned
Qing
around
Luo
and
to
looked
the
at
heart
the
of
youngsters
struggle.
who were struggling
Destroy
with
the
the wolf
four
beasts.
great families
At this
one by
moment,
one.
she
If
didn't
these
know
words
that her
were to be
one
spread
encouragement
to
made
the
the
other
youngsters'
three
inner
families.
heart
No
gradually
matter if Yi
become
Qing
strong
Luo had
and
such
filled with
intentions.
hope.
Probably.
Using the same method,
Yi Qing
the
Luo
youngsters
would be
hunted
harassed
two
by
wolf
the
beasts
other three
and
families
sliced the
in
corpses
West
according to their body
They would
parts,
rather kill
placing them
wrongly
into their
than let her
space
off.
bags and batches.
This was the principle
After
of those
two
who held
consecutive
high
wolf
positions.
beasts, The Yuchi family's patriarch saw that the situation was completely under his control. Found an empty space with a huge rock even for everyone to rest word of resistance and replenish their energy. He gave a cold laugh. 1 hour later, his eyes were the youngsters started their journey. A young lady. The last time Yiqing Luo came here, but after making she had already memorized the rough topography, she lost her magic beast. Now was the time for him to regain. She directly led the youngsters towards the bear with his thought in mind. Yuchi family's patriarch's face was filled with leveled magical beasts. I want to take revenge for my son. The corners of the Mu brothers and the others carefully avoided when they heard this. It was until they entered the boundary of the bear beast towards the patriarch when they stopped in their tracks. Don't talk about avenging your fourth mercenary group badge. This eldest young master was still understanding towards the bear beast. Revenge? Bear beasts were solitary magical beasts. Although the Mu brothers didn't have the awareness of disdain towards the Yuchi these bear beasts, it was clear that it was not appropriate for them to continue to attack their own manner. Given the so if they wanted to deal with the bear beast, Muzi fans even if the other bear beast saw smile, they wouldn't help. Of course, there was a possibility that after they killed the bear beast and took a step forward, they would snatch the bear beast's Patriarch Yuchi and attack Qing Luo and I are considered when the youngsters heard friends. Their gazes towards the bear beast were she would not do such a despicable thing. The body of the advanced voice was light, was as tall as a tree that yet it carried an irresistible dignity. Stood up. There must be a misunderstanding. The ground shook. However, today's situation is not saw that everyone was down and with a command. Detail. She directly. Why don't we both take a step back and resolve this misunderstanding? The bear's attacks were swift. What do you think, Patriarch Yuchi? It clearly looked the Patriarch's expression changed, but its movements were shocking. He was the patriarch of a Yuchi family. Just because of a junior's words, after expending a tremendous amount of effort, Yiqing Luo, the 60-odd people, no intention finally managed to take down a bear beast. Her lips curled into a cold arc with a smile, Luo had specially lured the bear beast. The feather fan on her fingertips seemed as though it could slice, so it didn't attract the attention of the other bear beasts. The requirement of the mission was that they needed the bear's entire body, 565, not a single part. Muzi fans' lips curled upwards if he didn't cut up his huge bear. His spatial pair of clear eyes shot out. Everyone's vision fell onto Yiqing Luo. Just one look at it made one scalp. They remembered that Yiqing Luo fan had a realm ring in her hand. Yuchi family's patriarch. Many things you could choose not to give me. Yiqing Luo's lips based on my alchemist guild's she had long planned to place the entire bear beast corpse. Following that, he fished out a palm just as she was about to head up and keep the bear beast into the wasn't this the alchemist guild's? She heard an exasperated shout. The surrounding guards immediately it's a bunch of trash mercenary group again. As they subconsciously took a step back. Enemies wouldn't meet unless they were enemies. That was the target which weren't these people large blue dragon mercenary powerhouses which they had just met at the fourth level. Yuchi family's patriarch naturally knew Muzi fan's identity. But he had not expected that Muzi fan would use the Alchemist Guild's Yiqing Luo suddenly had a bad to help Yiqing Luo Blue Dragon Mercenary Group's mission. Could it be that surely this Muzi fan, a bear beast, towards Yiqing If this was really the case, Yuchi family's patriarch restrained the deep thoughts in his eyes as his brows increased tight. In the next second, Yiqing Luo gazed at Muzi fan's back leading a group of people as they walked up in quick steps. His vision second time he had used the alchemist's corpse on the ground chief's identity as his eyes to help her out of trouble with a strange Yiqing Luo knew that Muzi had a different view. Wasn't the kind of person who liked to bully. He originally thought she understood the reason why Muzi gathered together to find some. If she destroyed, moreover, looking at them. All of them were obviously frail people without the strength to trust. And those people who wanted even if they looked handsome with Yuchi family would also didn't change the fact that their cultivation even if they killed her. But this group would have a dignified she looked down on. Letting Yuchi Peng off wasn't impossible. Jitsang Tian hadn't even said a word when a group member beside him definitely insist on not saying anything spoke out sharply. Trash group. If she let him off, you actually dare to snatch the Yuchi Peng wouldn't be able to live past today. Of course. This all bear depended on belongs to us Blue Dragon mercenary Yuchi family's patriarch cared about his face, but she insisted on Yuchi family's patriarch. But on seeing Lonling Nuo, who was sitting on Yuchi family's patriarch, he recalled her sad look when she was crying. Then she naturally wouldn't have the patience to continue to tangle. That's right. This was merely a mercenary group formed by. She might as well kidnap Yuchi since they dared to offend the world Blue Dragon and interrogate him properly about his relationship with the Dark Forces. And it was such a disheveled state. Yiqing Luo, then they must have never been a kind person, and there was no need for her to do. Don't even talk about whether it was the item required for their mission. Moreover, even if she let Yiqing Luo off, she might continue to be reviled. Anyway, this patriarch kind of Yuchi narrowed his eyes and stared at Muzi fan. But when that group member's words, he could clearly see the coldness in Muzi fan's eyes. It incited Muzi fans didn't seem to be joking.
Patriarch
Yuchi's
Yuchi had no choice but to consider the pros and cons
This bare
involved.
beast was obviously
After some
killed
careful
by us
consideration,
first, so
he
naturally
finally
it belongs
compromised.
to us.
All right,
You killed
we'll
it.
talk about this
The
later
group
for the
members
sake of the
sneered.
Young Alliance.
What
Master.
evidence do you have to prove that you killed it?
After Patriarch
believe
Yuchi
that?
finished his
If
words,
I say it's killed
he
by us,
immediately
Blue
shot a
Dragon mercenary
meaningful
group,
look towards
then this
Yi-Ching
magical
Luo.
beast,
Now that he had
mission
loosened
his
his
mouth.
mouth.
If
This was
Yi-Ching
obviously a
Luo
robber's theory.
still insisted
The world
on not
group's
letting go,
youngsters'
then
expressions
it would be a slap
instantly
on
turned
Mu Zifan's
extremely
face.
ugly as
Yi-Ching
all of them
Luo's
clenched their
lips
fists
curled up
tightly,
slightly,
wishing that
looking
they could rush up
extremely
and give him a
enchanting.
good beating.
But her charming
Damn it.
eyes
Do
were
they need to be so
suffused with a
open
cold
about
glint.
snatching things?
How boring.
Do they
Her
need to
palm
speak such
slowly
blatant
loosened
lies?
its grip on
Shameless
Yuchi's
to the
palm.
extreme.
Her pink
Their
lips
worldview
moved
had been
slightly,
refreshed,
and at the instant
they didn't
when
make a
her feather
move
fan moved away,
as they kept observing
she laughed
Yi-Ching
softly.
Luo's intentions.
Yuchi Peng.
They remembered.
Do you think that after you
Yi-Ching
leave this
Luo's
place, you will be
words.
able to live past
Everything had to
today?
be prioritized.
Saying that,
they had just
she
killed
used
the
both
bear
her
beast
hands to push
and were
Yuchi
currently
Peng
exhausted
towards Patriarch Yuchi.
Several guards,
If they were to really
immediately went
clash
up
with the
and
Blue Dragon
supported him.
mercenary group,
But
now,
Yuchi
they would
Peng's
definitely
eyes
not be able to
opened
gain any
wide as he
benefits.
stared blankly
But
in front.
to let them
His
swallow
face
this
filled with
grievance,
terror
they really
and
could not do
astonishment.
it.
Who wasn't
Yi-Ching
afraid of
Luo's
death?
expression
No one wasn't
remained
afraid of
calm
death.
as her charming
If he was
eyes
afraid of death,
stared coldly
then he
at
wouldn't have
Ji
begged
Tsung
Yi-Ching Luo
as her lips
to save him in the
curled
first
into a
place.
smirk of ridicule.
Yuchi Peng
After a
understood.
while,
She
Yi-Ching
blinked her charming
Luo's
eyes.
meaning.
If
And
he
a
wanted to
soft,
survive,
almost
then he must
inaudible
choose to
laugh
stay.
escape
Only
from
by
her
staying
lips.
with Yi-Ching Luo,
Blue Dragon
would he be able to
mercenary
obtain the
group.
guarantee of
This is
safety.
my first time
but
seeing
such a shameless mercenary group.
She lightly
Chapter
tapped her
566
pink lips with her hand,
Yi-Ching
revealing
Luo's
a
slender
charming
brows
expression.
rose
Tilting her
slightly
head, her
as she
eyes
squinted
curved.
at Yuchi
But that's
Peng with
true.
interest.
With a
but didn't
shameless
say
leader,
anything else.
there will naturally
It was
be a
unknown what the
shameless
dark
team.
forces had
You,
threatened
Ji
Yuchi
Tsung
Peng
Tian's
with
face
to actually make him
turned
not
steely
even
green
care about his
as he had
life.
not
Was he
expected
using the
Yi-Ching
entire
Luo
Yuchi
to fire
family
the
to
cannon
threaten
directly on it?
But since this was Yuchi Peng's choice, she would not force it. Yi-Ching Luo retreated back
Chapter
to Di
581.
Xian's side.
The
As
world
her
group,
little hand hooked
Ji
on
Tsung
his arm.
Tian's expression
This was an
changed
unconscious
once
action
again.
on her part.
The group, which he had
DMO
always regarded
Xian
as
glanced
trash,
sideways
was
as he
actually
stared at the cold,
was
and
actually the
stunning
world group
side profile
towards a
of the
world
woman
group's
beside
name.
him. Some
As
middle
his
and
eyes
lower rank
overflowed
mercenary
with a doting
groups in the
smile.
mercenary world
When the crowd
had all
saw
heard
this
it.
scene,
He
they
naturally
all
had
had
heard of the
different
world
thoughts.
group before.
The youths of the
Damn it.
mercenary group
Why hadn't he
covered their
thought of it from the
eyes
start?
and face
It was
palm.
rumored that the world
These two
group's members
people
were formed
really
by
didn't
a
let
group
go
of
of
17
any opportunity to show
18-year-old
off.
young men and
I.o.
ladies,
this
and
dog
all of
food.
them were handsome
Whereas for the
and
Mu
beautiful.
brothers,
Whereas
their eyes
the world
revealed
group's
an
group
astonished
leader was an
look as they
outstanding
exchanged
temperament
glances,
and an ice,
as though they were guessing the
cold-looking
relationship
blue-eyed man.
between
There
Yi-Ching
was also
Luo
a vice
and
group
that man.
leader who was an
Mu Zife
exquisite-looking
tugged
young
at his
lady
brother's
with
sleeves
enchanting
and
brows
said in a
and
low
eyes,
voice,
possessing
"Big brother,
a peerless
I told you to
beauty.
make your move
These
earlier,
people in front of them,
but you didn't listen.
Didn't they fit
Look at you
these
now.
rumors? Mu Zife cast
he actually
a
treated
sidelong
the other
glance
party
at DMO
as a
Xian
trash group,
and slapped
just
the
based
back
on
of his hand
60
away.
over young
His expression
youngsters.
was still
They
gentle,
accepted a
but his
high
tone was
grade rare
impatient
mission
and
Don't
directly
talk
rose to a
nonsense.
bronze plate
Looking at
mercenary
Duke
group.
Jing, who was
It could be
standing
seen just how
beside
much
Yuchi
honor
Peng.
points that
He didn't
high-grade
conceal the
rare
jealousy
mission rewarded.
and hatred
The
in his
higher
eyes
the honor
as he
points,
stared fiercely
the higher the
at Yi-Ching
difficulty of
Luo
that mission,
and DMO
which was totally
Xian.
impossible.
If it wasn't for
to
the fact
complete.
that Yuchi
But the
family's
world group
patriarch
managed to
didn't
do it.
dare to go
They
against
broke the
Yi-Ching
Mercenary
Luo.
Association's
He
legend
absolutely
of the
would
number
have
of
rushed
one
up
mercenary
right now,
group, which had
pulling
always
that
been
adulterous
worshipped
couple
as a
apart.
god group.
He had
Replacing
obviously
it to
taken a
become
fancy
second
to this
legend.
woman.
Ji
Now,
Tsung Tian's
she actually
heart
dared to
started
pull
to
on another
feel
man.
apprehensive.
Moreover,
he even
that
felt a
man's
little
appearance was way
terrified
too
and
ordinary.
uneasy.
Yi
as he
Ching
didn't want to have
Luo,
any more
standing
clashes
beside
with this
that
group.
man,
Was simply like a
qualifications?
fresh
Just
flower
based on you.
inserted into
Do you even
cow
have the
dung.
qualifications
Duke
to
Jing
talk
opened
about
his mouth
qualifications
and
with
clenched
Brother
his
Song
fists
Tian?
in hatred.
Lan
The
Ling
jealousy
Nuo
and
stared
hatred in his
fiercely at
eyes
DMO
were
Xian.
unstoppable.
She remembered that it was
this
this
gaze
man
naturally
who threw her
attracted
out
Yi Ching Luo.
It was merely
and
because of
DMO
inertia that
Xian's
she
attention.
accidentally
DMO
fell into his arms.
Xian's lips
As a
curled
man,
upwards,
as
facing
his
a
eyes
beauty,
shimmered.
throwing
He
herself
intentionally
into
lowered
his
his head
arms.
and moved
Shouldn't he
closer
take the
to
chance to be a
Yi-Ching
hero
Luo's ear
to
as he
save the
laughed
beauty?
lightly.
She didn't
How do you
despise
feel?
him for his
Evil
ordinary
heart.
looks.
Every word
and
came
ugly
out from Yi
looks,
Qing,
allowing him to
Luo's
touch her
pink
beautiful
lips.
body.
She
and
pursed
he
her
actually
lips
despised
and
her.
turned her face
Since
away
young,
with a look of
Lanling
disgust.
Nuo had
What are you
never
waiting
suffered
for?
such
Go.
humiliation before.
Patriarch Yuchi's
Brother
heart
Tsang
was filled with
Tian
unwillingness,
snatched the
but there was
magical
nothing he
beast
could
back.
do as he clenched
Teach them
his
a
teeth
fierce
tightly
lesson.
and spoke to Yi
Lanling
Qing
Luo
Luo in an
clenched her
evil
fists
tone.
tightly.
Seventh
as she
Missy.
suppressed the malevolent
This patriarch
expression
will
on her
visit
face,
another day.
trying her best
Yi
to put on a
Qing
coquettish
Luo laughed
attitude.
softly.
She wasn't a
That
mercenary
laughter
group
was
member
ethereal
and didn't
and
understand
pleasing
what
to
the
the
world
ears.
group was.
However,
Nor did she know
in the
what
years of
glorious
Yuchi
deeds were there
patriarch,
under the heavens.
it sounded like
Moreover,
a demon
under
mocking
Ji
his
Tsang Tian's
incompetence.
daily bragging,
Patriarch Yuchi's
Lanling
complexion
Nuo
was stiff.
unanimously agreed that Blue Dragon
He glanced
mercenary
at
group
Mu Zi
was an
Fan,
especially
who was
powerful
standing at the
mercenary
side,
group.
and
How could
clenched his
these
teeth.
young and small
Still,
mercenary
he
groups
turned around
be
and
compared to
left.
Blue Dragon
Originally,
mercenary group?
under Yuchi Peng's
Jitsong
fanfare,
Tian's
he had
original
mobilized a
intention
large
to
number of
retreat
people to look
started
for
to
Yi
hesitate
Luo,
again.
wanted to take her life, to wash away the Yuchi
Lanling
family's
Nuo
black
obviously
mark.
bore a
In
grudge
the end,
against the world
he was
group.
sent away
If he
just like
chose
that.
to retreat now,
In the eyes of the
wouldn't
onlookers,
his sister Nuo
the
laugh
Yuchi
at him
family's
for being
departure
useless?
seemed
He knew
dejected
better than
and
anyone
dejected.
else how he usually
Looking at the
boasted about
1,000
the
guards
Blue Dragon
team,
mercenary
one
group
after another,
in front,
leaving the
of
vicinity of
Lanling
a
Nuo.
huge mansion.
Otherwise,
the frost on
Lanling
Yi
Nuo wouldn't have followed them to the
slowly
magical
dissipated.
beast forest.
The corners of his
Originally,
mouth also
he wanted to
revealed
show
a
off his
trace of a
prowess in
sincere
front of
smile.
Lanling Nuo,
Zifan,
and then express his love
Zifei.
for her.
Thank
He
you
had
for
loved
helping me
Lanling
out.
Nuo.
The two
for
Mu
such a long
brothers
time.
shook their heads.
How could he destroy everything
This wasn't
now?
considered as
No man
helping
was
Yi
willing to
Qing
let the
Luo
woman
out of her
loved
predicament.
look down on it.
They knew Yi
Jitsong
Qing
Tian
Luo's
clenched his fist.
If she
tightly
really
as he
wanted to
straightened
form a
his back and
feud
stood
with
in
the
front of
Yuchi
his group
family,
members,
the Yuchi
looking at
family
Yi
would
Qing
definitely
Luo
fall into
arrogantly.
turmoil.
If
Other
you know
than
what's
giving
good for
patriarch
you, bring your
Yuchi
men
way out
and leave
they
this
were
place
also
now.
thinking for their own
Otherwise,
family's sake.
don't blame this
Once
group
the
leader
Yuchi
for
family
not
was in
showing
turmoil,
any mercy.
That arrogant look, forcing himself to put
Chapter
on a fearless
5,
look,
67.
made Yi Qing
Don't
Luo
stand at the
laugh.
entrance.
She had
Come
been
in first.
observing Blue
Yi
Dragon
Qing
mercenary
Luo took a
group
step back
and observing
indicating for
Jitsong
them to enter the
Tian.
mansion.
Jitsong
There were too
Tian
many commoners
must have heard of the
crowding
world
around
group's
and
name.
standing
He was
at the
also
entrance.
fearful of
It was
the
as
world
though they were
group.
being watched by a monkey show. The world group's youngsters retreated to the two sides, revealing
Chapter
a path.
582.
The Mu brothers
Even
didn't
now,
act pretentiously,
although there was no
as the
fear
two
on
of them
Jitsong
entered the
Tian's
mansion
face,
one
but if one took
after
a closer look at his
the mansion's
slightly
main door had
trembling
just
body,
closed when
one
Wu
would still be able to
Zifan
tell.
sighed softly.
Seeing that the leader
Qing
had
Luo,
spoken,
I
the
know
member
you're not
became
a rash
even
person,
more
and
spirited.
I know you're
As if he had found a
person.
backer.
Today's matter,
He shouted again.
although I'm not sure
Did
what
you
exactly
hear that?
happened, but
Our guild
you shouldn't
leader
have clashed
is
with the
magnanimous
Yuchi family
and won't bicker with
Mu
your trashy
Zifan
team.
and Yi
Get lost
Qing
right
Luo
now.
had interacted
Yi
for a
Qing
few
Luo's
days,
eyes
and towards Yi
narrowed
Qing
slightly,
Luo's character,
as she didn't
he
even
more
bother
or
to
less
take a
had
look
some understanding.
at Jitsong
He
Tian.
naturally believed
She directly
that
bent
Yi
down
Qing
as a
Luo
feather fan,
wouldn't make a
touched
move
the
on the
bear
Yuchi
beast's
family
corpse
for no
slightly.
reason.
A
But today's
fluorescent
timing
light
wasn't
flickered,
right.
and
You're
the
not
huge
afraid of the
bear
Yuchi
carcass
family,
disappeared in
but
the
you
blink
should
of an
more
eye.
or less
Blue
consider
Dragon
for the
mercenary
people
group's
around you.
members all
Mu
opened their
Zifan's
eyes
peripheral
wide
vision
as
shot a
even
glance
using
at
their
those
toes
10 over
to guess that
youngsters
Yi
were
Qing
following
Luo
behind.
must have
These
done
young
something
faces
to
looked
this bear beast's
extremely
corpse.
unfamiliar.
This action was
Apparently,
obviously
they were
provoking
youngsters
them
who
on
were
purpose.
inexperienced.
How
They saw it
dare
very
you.
clearly.
That group member
Earlier
was
when
so
they rushed
infuriated
over,
that his
they
face
saw these
flushed
youngsters
red as
standing
he
behind
pointed at
Yi Qing Luo, facing
berated.
thousands of
You
experienced
even
guards.
dare to snatch
They were
our
clearly
Blue
afraid,
Dragon mercenary
but the
group's
look in their
mission.
eyes remained
Don't blame us for
firm
bullying
and
you.
determined.
They spoke
None of them
righteously
retreated because of fear,
as if they were the ones
all
who
of them
had killed
stood
the bear
behind
beast.
Yi Qing Luo, becoming
gave
her
a cold
strongest
laugh
fortress.
as she turned around.
These people
and
were
walked
sincerely
deeper
comrades
into the eerie
with
cold.
Yi Qing Luo.
How could the members behind
because
him
of
endure
this,
such
Mu
provocation?
Zifan was willing to
This
raise
woman in
this
front of him
suggestion
actually
to Yi Qing
dared to
Luo.
look down on him.
When Yi Qing
He
Luo
wanted her
heard
to
that,
pay a painful
she went into a
price.
slight daze.
That member
her
placed the
gaze
weapon in his hand
subconsciously
tightly
fell
as
onto
he
those
directly
brothers
flew
behind her.
towards
She
Yi
finally
Qing Luo's
understood the
direction.
reason why Mu
Yi Qing
Zifan
Luo
stopped
turned
her.
around with her back.
Once upon a time,
facing the
she
Blue
was
Dragon
alone.
mercenary.
No matter where she went,
the surrounding the world
no
group
matter
members
what
were
dangerous
all looking
mission
at
she
this
took,
scene.
not
She was
knowing if they
forever
were all
alone.
silly
She
or
had
what,
also developed
no one
the
actually
habit of
reminded
doing
Yi
things
Qing
alone.
Luo. Now,
As for
with
Yi
these
Qing
brothers and
Luo,
sisters,
she didn't seem
from
to
the
know
moment
that there
she
was someone
placed these
sneak
people
attacking
in her
her
from behind.
She had always
Lanling
remembered
Nuo
that she
sat
wasn't
on the back
alone,
of a wolf beast,
but a team.
and watched the scene in
Her
front
every
of her.
action,
A hint
every
of a
word
word
and
in
action
flashed
could
past her
possibly
eyes.
affect the entire
It's this kind of team. If she
When
really
her
chopped
boss
off
is being
Yuchi
ambushed,
Peng's other
they can
hand
only
earlier.
stand by and
These
watch.
youngsters around
This
her
is retribution.
would definitely be
She was
targeted by the
hinting
Yuchi
at the
family.
fourth level.
Thank you for your advice.
Yi Qing Luo
Luckily, you
and the
stopped
rest
me.
were leisurely
Yi Qing
chatting by the
Luo's
side,
smile bloomed
while the
like a
other
flower.
youngsters were
The
clearing away
Mu
around
brothers
her.
chuckled
When the
and
members
said,
of Blue Dragon
if you want to
mercenary
thank
group
us,
heard this,
you can treat us
they
to a
felt that
meal
it
in the
made
canteen
sense.
after the academy
This was
reopens.
retribution.
The
No
members
problem.
of this useless
Yi
team
Qing
put
Luo
themselves
nodded
in a
without
high and
hesitation.
mighty position,
Turning around,
ordering their
he
own
changed the
team
topic.
members around as
Oh,
they
right
pleased.
about Yuchi
He deserved
Peng.
to be abandoned
Follow
by
me
his
to the
own
hall.
team
members. They talked
just as
Blue
they
Dragon
walked,
mercenary
and
groups
along
members
the way,
thought that Yi
the
Qing
other brothers
Luo
also
was dead
dispersed.
for sure. Too many things
The
had happened
ambushing
today.
member suddenly let out a blood
When they thought of the
scream.
even more
With a
serious
whoosh,
mission that
the
awaited
figure
them
was kicked
tomorrow,
into the bushes at
the
the
youths
side.
naturally
The
chose
sound
to
of a heavy
suppress the
object
excitement
falling
in
to the
their
ground
hearts
was
and return to their
accompanied by the
rooms to
painful
rest.
wails
The
of the
huge
regiment
mansion
member.
suddenly
It was
became much
extremely
quieter
ear-piercing.
in the lobby.
What was going on?
After everyone was seated, Yiqing Luo didn't hold back at all.
Tian's
She told
gaze
him about how
subconsciously
Yuqi
fell
Feng
onto
and
Yiqing
Luo had fallen into the
However,
Dark Forces
the
trap,
slender figure
and how they had
still
signed a
had her
soul
back
contract
facing
with
the
them
Dark Forces.
as she returned to the
Almost
middle
being
of
swallowed
Wang
up,
Yunjian's
the Mu
group
brothers looked at
before
each
turning
other.
around.
Mu
At the instance
Zifei
when she turned around to
an
look at him,
astonished expression.
Ji Tian,
This is
obviously
actually
saw
true.
a deep
Dark
sense
forces,
of ridicule.
the
in
beast that
Yiqing
was
Luo's
expelled by
eyes.
the Nirvana realm,
Yes, it was
had
mockery.
actually returned.
Laughing
There
at
must
his
be a reason why the
incompetence,
Dark Forces
mocking their
would hide
mercenary
in the dark.
group for
Yiqing
overestimating
Luo's
themselves.
expression was grave.
That shameful
as she looked at
feeling
them.
exploded.
The Dark
forth
Forces
in
kept
that
on
instant.
using powerful
Ji
energy
Tian
to lure
was
the
so
cultivators
angry that
to
he was
sign
trembling.
the contract.
The current him didn't
and
care if the group in
subsequently
front of
swallowing
him
the
was that
other
famous
party's soul.
mercenary group
This action
or not.
is too
He only knew
abnormal.
that he could not let go of anyone who mocked him. Otherwise, Blue
Chapter
Dragon mercenary
568
group wouldn't have a
Indeed,
foothold
this was
in the
normal.
mercenary world.
Dark forces.
He wanted to kill.
This force had
Yiqing
already
Luo.
disappeared for
He
several
wanted to make
decades.
Yiqing Luo
All along,
pay a painful
they were the
price
forces
for
which were
today's
expelled
actions.
by Nirvana realm.
He had only occasionally heard about this dark power from the mouth of the previous generation. Today,
Chapter
the dark forces had
583.
appeared once again.
The other party was
and
just
in
a
such
trashy
manner.
mercenary group.
Could it be?
Why
Were
did
they
it feel
preparing to
that?
make a comeback?
Ji
You must be
Tian's
careful
side
of the
had
dark
always
forces.
been on the losing
That
end.
profound
Moreover,
energy
they were
is
controlled
indeed
by the other
powerful,
party,
but it
until
ultimately
they had
isn't
no way to
yours.
resist.
If you lose
Earlier,
yourself for a
they didn't even see
short-term
anyone
benefit,
making a move,
then you will be
and
consigned
Alu
to
was sent
eternal
flying.
damnation.
Lanling knew
Yiqing
all, started
Luo
to suspect
narrowed her eyes
if what Ji
as she kept
Tian
away the
said
deep
was
thoughts
true
in
or
her
not.
eyes.
Suddenly,
As she opened her
she
mouth
started
to
to
remind
regret
him.
listening.
The hearts
to
of the Mu
Ji
brothers were filled with
Tian's
shock
words
at this
abruptly
moment.
following
Dark
him
forces
into
could
the
make
magic
use of this
beast
energy
forest.
to
Seeing
swallow
his
a
beloved
cultivator's
woman's
soul.
suspicious
How
gaze,
many cultivators
Ji
would be
Tian's
helped?
pride
It was simply an
suffered a
unknown
serious
number.
blow.
After
A
all,
gush of nameless
which cultivator
fury
didn't
started
thirst for
burning.
power?
He
Even
clenched
they
his
too
fists tightly
thirsted
as he
for
stared
power.
fiercely
They
at
couldn't help but
Yiqing
feel
Luo,
deeply moved
shouting out
that
sharply.
this Yiqing Luo
Snatch our bear
was
beast
still
back.
young,
Let
but her
them witness
comprehension
the power
was
of the
not
Blue
what
Dragon
most people
mercenary
can achieve.
group.
They had to
Yiqing
investigate
Luo
on what
and the others
motive
looked
this
at Ji
dark force, which was
Tian
hiding
as
in the
though they were
dark
looking
hat.
at a bunch of
Moreover,
clowns.
such a matter
Although the
had
youngsters
happened
were
in the
already
world
very
today.
tired,
So,
but the thought
they
of
should
being
have
able to
something to
teach
say
these
within the
arrogant Blue
Mu
Dragon
brothers then
mercenary
got
group
up
a
and
lesson.
bade farewell.
All of them were as
By the time
excited
they sent the
as
Mu
though they were
brothers
out of the
injected
mansion.
with chicken blood.
Everyone's expressions in the main
asterisk
hall
her.
instantly.
They had wanted to
turned
beat them
grave.
up for a long
Yiqing
time.
Luo
Right.
returned to
If
the
it wasn't
chair
for Madame
and
Qing
sat
Luo's
down as her
words,
eyes
they
were
absolutely would have
from the
charged
current
up
situation.
right now.
Yuchi
These
family will
youngsters,
not
under
find any trouble
Yiqing
today.
Luo's influence,
But in future,
all understood
they will
one
definitely
logic.
not
That was
let this
battle.
matter rest.
The most realistic
Everyone
battle,
nodded, which
before
was now
Yuchi family's
their battle
patriarch
with
left.
the Blue Dragon
He left
mercenary
behind
group.
that sentence.
The reason why
Apparently,
the Blue
he
Dragon
had already
mercenary
bore a
group
grudge
was able to
against
walk till
Yiqing
now
Luo.
to become
What
a
we need to
bronze
do
plate
is to
mercenary
raise
group
the group's
was
ability.
because the group
Long
leader,
Yunjian, who
who
had always been silent, opened his mouth calmly.
but there was no way
as
to
his
deny
azure
that
blue
they had
eyes
absolute
looked
ability
at Yiqing
to be able to
Luo
battle with them
quietly.
They should be able to gain
Xiao
quite
Jin
a bit of
agreed.
upgrade. We're not afraid
Yiqing
of Yuchi
Luo's
family,
brows
but
creased
the others,
as she was
that
about
might
to
not
say
be the
something.
case. Suddenly,
Although
her
the
ears
world group's
moved
youngsters were in
slightly
devil class,
as her
and had
vision
gone through their
seemed to
training,
have touched
their
something.
profound
Her eyes
grade
suddenly
and
narrowed
skills
as she
overall
gave a tender
standard was
shout.
considered to
Retreat
be extremely high.
immediately.
But they lacked
Her
experience.
expression became
They lacked
solemn.
actual
The
combat
emotion
experience,
and
just
Long
like
Yunjian's
Bei Ming
expressions
Yunxiang.
instantly
Why
sunk
was he able to
as their
advance
gazes
the
shot
profound
towards the direction
grade
of
of
that
that member
member
called
called climbing the
Alu
Iron
at the
Wire?
same time?
That was because
When those
when he was
youngsters
close
were
to
rubbing their
death,
palms,
his
heard
mental
that.
state had
They went
some
into a
comprehension,
blank
as they
as he was
speedily
able to
followed
advance.
just as what
Yiqing
Yiqing
Luo's
Luo had
instructions
said.
Retreating
The only
into the
way to
depths of
become
the forest.
stronger was
This
through
action,
continuous battles.
in the eyes of the
based
Blue
on the
Dragon
situation of the
mercenary
past
group's
2
members,
days,
was because
these
they were
youths
afraid of their
still
ability
too
and
inexperienced.
wanted to escape.
If it wasn't
These
for
group members
Yiqing
had
Luo's
always
arrival,
been proud,
reminding
and
them
arrogant,
they would
earlier
probably
they were
still
humiliated
lock
by
these students
Yiqing
in
Luo
devil class
and
for
the others.
secret training.
So why would they let them off?
Under
Long
Ji
Yunjian
Tian's
and
command,
Xiao Jin
the group of them
exchanged
immediately
glances.
wanted to chase
Suddenly,
There was a
Suddenly,
lofty sentiment
shrill
that
scream
spread out
came
in
from the
their
bushes
hearts.
behind him.
Perhaps
It was Lu's
they
voice.
might even have the confidence
Ji
to
Tian
emerge
and the others
as the
stopped in their
champion
tracks
of
as
the
they turned their
interclass
heads
tournament
over.
8
months later. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as
only
she
to
muttered
see
to
a
herself for a moment.
huge,
It was
pitch-black
easy to
object
increase
poking its
one's
head out from the
profound
bushes.
rank and strength.
When he stood up,
he
been
was
doing
doing
this
this
all
all
along.
along.
It was a
However,
beast of
raising
pitch-black
one's strength
beast.
was
Was
not
not something
something
that
that
could
could
be
be
done
done
in
in a day.
And one of its claws
Some
hooked
experts
a
were
Alu
often
up
stuck
with
at a
only
bottleneck,
one nail.
unable to
Alu
advance
was already
for
a
years
25-year
or even
old
decades,
adult man,
not
with
to
a tall
mention
and
these
sturdy
youths
figure.
who had yet
But compared to the giant
completely open
beast's
their
fingernails,
hearts.
tomorrow
seemed
was the
so
last day
tiny.
of the holiday.
He was as small
It
as
seemed
an
that
ant.
she
Without
had to
any
lead these
explanation,
people to the
magical
magical
beast
beast
stuffed
forest.
the person
The
who was
magical
hooking
beast
onto
forest
into its
was a
mouth.
place where magical
Instantly,
beasts
blood
roamed
splattered
freely.
everywhere.
The last time
Alu
she
didn't even
followed
let out a
the
scream
MO
before he was
chewed
chewed
up.
She
and
reached
swallowed
the sixth
into the
level.
belly of the giant
This time,
beast.
All the
goal
members
was
of the group were scared silly. The fifth level, it wasn't
what
just
kind of monster
magical
was this?
beasts. It actually swallowed a living person just like that. Just as they
Chapter
were in a daze,
569.
that giant beast
Why don't
started
everyone
to move
rest early
once
to
again
conserve your
as
energy?
it walked out of
Tomorrow
the forest.
morning,
Group
Group
leader
leader
will go to the
mercenary
mercenary
group
long
to
to take on 10 high-level missions related to the Magic Beast Forest. What do you think? Magic Beast Forest? Chapter
place.
5. These youngsters had never
Under
been to that
Yi
place
Ching
before.
Luo's reminder,
But Yi
the
Ching
World Group's
Luo's
youngsters
suggestion
retreated to a safe
Long
place,
Yin Zhan,
avoiding
avoiding
the
the helpless
anything,
fate of being
so the
trampled
others
to
naturally
death
had
by
no
the huge
objections.
beast.
Unknowingly,
Jitsong Tian
Yi Ching
swiftly
Luo
reacted
had
as
already
he pulled
unknowingly
Wanling
become their
Nuo,
center.
who was sitting on the
Long
mound
Yin
into his
Zhan's
arms.
eyes flashed
Following
slightly
that,
as
he
his
sped
eyes
towards the
revealed a
World
glint
Group's
of
direction.
admiration.
When the other group
This was
members
indeed
saw
a good
that,
way to kill
all of them
two
started
birds
to
with
rush
one
over
stone.
in terror.
Not only could
Oh
it
my
help
God,
the World Group
what the hell
gain
was
more
this
honor
thing?
points,
They had been
it
in
could
the
also
Magic
improve
Beast
their own
Forest for
training.
so many years,
But
and
whether
had
they could
never
complete
seen
the
this kind of
mission would
magical
depend on
beast
everyone's
in the
ability.
fifth level.
Subconsciously,
When Blue Dragon
Long
mercenary
Yin
groups
Zhan
moved
looked
towards
rushed
DMO
over.
Xian, who
The
was
World
seated
Group's
beside
youngsters were
Yi
simply
Ching
cursing
Luo,
in their hearts,
wanting to see what
they couldn't
opinions he
help
had.
but wanted to curse
But he
this
saw
bunch
DMO
of shameless
Xian's
people.
pair of narrow
Xian,
peach blossom
Yi Ching
eyes
Luo's
from the
brows
stars
creased
creased
tightly
tightly
as
had
she
never
tugged
left
Yi
Yi
Ching
Ching
Luo's
Luo's
side
side
profile.
as her pair of charming
His eyes
eyes
were
congealed
filled
on
with
that
gentleness.
huge beast.
A gentleness
She wouldn't
which
easily
belonged
open her
to
mouth
Yi Ching
to
Luo
DMO
alone.
Xian.
His slender
But under the
fingers held a cup
situation,
of tea.
she had to
as he
open her mouth.
leisurely drank the
This
tea.
huge beast
He wasn't
was
worried
too
at all,
dangerous,
as though he was
she might be able to
extremely
use
assured
blink
towards Yi
movement
Ching
to
Luo
avoid this huge
and believed in
beast
all the
attack,
suggestions,
but the
which
World
Yi
Group's
Ching
youngsters
Luo
were
raised.
not able to
The
do
questions
so.
which Long Yin
Moreover,
Zhan wanted to ask,
unless it was the last
eventually
resort,
stopped in
she
his
really
mouth.
didn't want to use
These
the
2
blink movement
days,
secret
the
art.
DMO
Let's not
Xian's
talk about the
attitude
fact that
towards
this
Yi
secret
Ching
art
Luo
was used
was the
to save her
clearest to them.
life.
DMO
The fact that
Xian
every
would
time
never
she
easily
used it,
obstruct
she would be caught
Yi
red-handed
Ching
and was
Luo's
even
growth
recognized
and
by
improvement.
others.
This
This
kind of
secret
free
art,
love
if
was
possible,
enough to prove
Yi Ching Luo would
DMO
try not to use
Xian's
it.
sincerity.
The huge beast
towards
speed
Yi
was
Ching
simply
Luo.
too fast.
In his mind,
Its one
Xiao
step was
Jin's words
equivalent
suddenly
to
rang.
everyone releasing
Zhan,
all their
we have a good
profound
brother,
chi
a very
and
good,
sprinting for
a
10
very good
meters.
brother.
But in just
Long
a
Yin
few
Zhan's
short
hand
moments,
suddenly
another
clenched
10
tightly.
over Blue
The next
Dragon
morning,
group's
the
members
group of them were
died
all ready
tragically
to set
under
off.
the huge
The
beast's
youngsters in the
feet.
World Group
There were some
were
who were
exceptionally
swept by the
excited.
huge beast's
This was the last
claws
day of their
and
holiday,
directly
and it was
thrown
also
into
their
its
first
mouth.
time going on a
The scene was
large-scale
extremely
mission as a
bloody
group.
and ferocious.
Magic Beast Forest,
Based on her strength,
that place which
there was
numerous
absolutely
mercenary
no way
groups
to
wanted to go
protect
on
the World
experienced
Group's
training.
youngsters.
This was their
Yi
first time
Ching
going,
Luo
so
bit
their
her
hearts
lower
were
lip
filled
tightly
with
as her
anticipation.
slender fingers
Magic Beast
subconsciously
Forest,
clasped
other than mercenary
DMO
groups going on
Xian's
missions,
arm
there were many
tightly.
academies
She was
classes,
too weak.
large
The
families,
bigger
young
the
masters,
responsibility,
and young ladies,
the more
etc.,
she felt
who went
that
on
she was
various
too weak.
experience training here.
After she returned
Magic
to the
Beast
academy,
Forest, she
high-level
wanted to head to the
missions.
spiritual chi
Once it's
treasure
completed,
land.
there will
and
be a
enter
total
the
of
Azure
80
Dew
mercenary
bracelet
group
to first
credit points,
breakthrough,
and there will be other
found
medicinal
grade to
herbs
earth
as rewards.
profound realm. Long
DMO
Yin
Xian's
Zhan
palm
arranged the
was
mission
warm
scroll
as
which
it gently
had
covered
just received
Yi
as he
Ching
spoke.
Luo's eyes.
10 high-level
His
missions
voice was calm
for
without
only
any ripples,
80 mercenary
but Yi
group
Ching
honor
Luo
points.
could hear his
Thinking
concern.
about it, a
It's
high-level
okay.
rare mission
I'm here.
actually rewarded
Just 4 simple
150
words
honor
made
points.
Yi
As
Ching
expected,
Luo's heart
that
trembled
mission had been
suddenly.
categorized
DMO Xian's
incorrectly.
palm blocked her vision, and it was pitch black.
Speaking of the reward,
she blinked.
Yi Ching
Her
Luo
long,
turned her
curly
head
eyelashes
and looked at
brushed
Long Yin
past
Zhan.
his palm
Yesterday,
like a small brush.
I handed in that
Shortly
high-grade
after,
rare
the
missions
sounds of the
reward.
youth's
I
heaving
need
sighs
2
of relief
medicinal
could be
herbs.
heard.
Back then, what attracted her the most was the 2
Yi Ching
medicinal
Luo
herbs.
grabbed onto
Long Yin
DMO
Zhan took
Xian's
out
palm
all the
with
rewards
both
from the metal
hands
space,
and
only to see
placed
the
them
World
on the
Group's
table.
youngsters and
The
Blue
sound
Dragon
of
Group's
500
members all
gold
squeezing
coins
over.
clattering
Although the
against each
youths
other
were saying
was
nasty
crisp and
things
clear.
and ridiculing
The eyes of the
group
youths were
members,
about to pop
they still
out.
made way for them
Profound
to have a place
iced
to stand.
immortal root.
Not long
in
after,
infant grass.
this small piece
I
of
only
flat
want these
ground
2
was
ingredients.
filled with people.
Yi
As for
Ching
the
Luo
giant took the
beast,
2 herbs
it kept
over.
raising its
The
foot,
mercenary
trying to
group's
step on
development
them.
cannot
However,
be without
the
the
huge
support
foot
of
that
money.
was lifted up
now,
seemed to be
all the money
blocked by
earned from
something
emissions
and was bounced
temporarily
back.
stored.
The giant Beast's
very
body
important
swayed,
for the future
and
development.
like a collapsing mountain,
These two herbs,
it fell straight
Biming
back.
Lulu narrowed
boom,
her
boom,
eyes
as
a
she fiddled
deafening
with the
sound
profound
reverberated
ice
along with the
immortal
entire
root
magic
and sniffed
beast.
for a shape.
Isn't this medicine?
It wasn't an
used to treat
exaggeration
bone
to
injuries?
describe it.
As
When
the
the youngsters
earth
heard
quaking
that,
and
they
mountains
immediately
shaking.
looked
It was an
towards
enchantment.
Yi-Ching Luo.
Yi-Ching Luo raised her eyes towards the sky, and she could faintly
Chapter
see a
570.
transparent ray of light.
Yi-Ching Luo shook her
appearing
head,
and
not
disappearing
me.
indistinctly.
Biming Lulu
When did
picked up
DMO
another medicinal
conjure
herb
the
with a bit of
enchantment?
confusion in her eyes.
These two herbs were both medicinal herbs used to treat bone injuries.
Chapter
However,
585.
could these two medicinal
What is that
ingredients be
thing?
used together?
The group
to
members
refine
heaved a
an
sigh of
elixir?
relief.
What kind of
as their
medicinal
legs were
pill
so
was being
weak
refined
that they couldn't even
There
stand
didn't seem to
properly.
be they had
Such
all
a
witnessed their
prescription
own
in his memory.
comrades being
When a
eaten up by
refinement
that
is
huge
successful,
beast.
being trampled to death by that huge beast without any chance to resist at all. They didn't know how long this barrier by the medicinal herbs and knew that if there wasn't a barrier, wouldn't they all die? When she saw the medicinal herbs and herself, not knowing how to rouse creased tightly as she stared at that huge beast. Xiao Jing clapped his hands as her eyes indicating for everyone to look at him. After some time, all right, she released your best. After completing the mission, let me take a look at the surrounding situation. The leader will treat you all to a good meal. Demo Xian's eyes sunk as he tried to return to the academy. Even he didn't know where this huge beast came from. Let's go. It was too dangerous. I heard that the training in the magical beast forest. I'll ride on little real training and take a look in midair. That is the realm of actual combat. Why don't we have a competition to see who can hunt more magical beasts and one beast and complete more missions? Left the barrier and looking at the youngsters and noisy looks. After leaving the barrier, Luo's eyes were filled with warmth. Then sensed she really liked this stinky. Everyone was full of vigor and hope for the future. Huge beast. She had to work harder to improve once again found rank towards the direction of the barrier. At the very least, Luo gazed as the vice captain saw that not too far behind she should protect them well. Beast. She smiled. The man behind her also stared at her and smiled. Just like a beast. The group of people left the mansion, surging forward in an extremely every youth's heart was filled with curiosity. Forget about an anticipation towards the unknown. However, the group of people did not notice that they were going to be trapped in the magic beast sneaky figure hiding in the dark was quietly watching. Suddenly, old man Sending's voice rang in her with his eyes. This is troublesome. Figure muttered softly. Not just troublesome. Magical beast trouble. Then that magic quickly left in the opposite direction. If I didn't recognize wrongly, it should be shortly after level advanced. An old man in a new white robe walked out of the mansion. Old man Song stroked his beard, apparently looked at the sneaky figure meaningfully. Even if the sky mystic overlord strong, it was better to leave the matters of the young to the. They would also be at a disadvantage. He did not lend to mention you all. What's more, Luo, the little girl was overwhelmed with shock when she heard. Since he was picked up by the little girl, her eyes suddenly widened. He would guard this mansion unbelievably at that huge with his thought in mind. In front of her, the old man leisurely strolled. Even a sky mystic overlord, the youngsters of the world group stopped at the entrance of the magic beast forest. Legendary level. The breeze was chill now, and the ground was covered with withered leaves sunk after entering the seventh. There were also countless. How did this child run from the magical level to the fifth level? Humans in the tens of millions of years of history of the magical. As far as the eye could see, aside from large-scale beasts and trees, magical beasts would never cross the boundary that belonged to them. Moreover, dense branches, even if it was a beast grew all over the place, it would at most be only a faint ray of light. This childine, just the outer perimeter alone, gave off Luo's eyes suddenly sunk as her youth's legs were trembling from excitement and excitement. Her eyes, while they were standing at the entrance, there were also neat teams. It was simply impossible for a high-level 30-man teams of the 50-man team to appear on the 100-man teams among them. He looked majestic and handsome. The youth stared at those teams. If this high-level mirage, the blood in their hearts was boiling. Exciting. It was too exciting. It was now impossible. They had also become a part of such vision. Surveyed the surroundings. Are you guys ready? As she carefully, Luo's cold voice was filled with an irresistible Luo, the youngsters immediately puffed out their densely packed magical as their voices were loud. When she looked over again, ready, the figure had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it was just an illusion. Chapter 571. Yiqing Luo frowned. The youngster's heart suddenly jolted. No, they thought that they would be an illusion, messing around. The appearance of these magical beasts. Only then did they realize that the missions was indeed premeditated. Was it a ploy by the dark forces? At the fifth level, to annihilate, they should be laughing and saying that their group leader had thought too highly. Like how they massacred, or should they be crying and to destroy the world group leader? Yiqing Luo gave a cold laugh. However, the mission which their group leader had taken on, the man and beast returned to the vice group leader was the accomplice. So even if they had to kneel down, they had to complete the mission. Under the leadership of the few Chapter 5, the youngsters took their first step forward without any hesitation. Shin's expression they started from the first level and moved as that pair of eyes, which along the way, with brilliance, Yiqing Luo and the rest, his brows creased as he looked outside the array barrier at the huge. They would give way without any intention to make. It's actually childine. Whereas for those youngsters behind them, bit her lower lip as her slender hand hooked on a D. According to their abilities, were split into 10 over groups of 5. There's a huge batch of magical beasts coming over. Magical beast. It seems to be a beast. Whereas she Ju this time around, little nine, it would be hard for them to escape picking up from the magic cores. Yiqing Luo had always assumed that their levels were rather low and their magic above were few and far between, which was Sky Mystic. Just like this, the group man Song directly that Sky Mystic overlord strong exponents. The youngsters at this were unable to subdue child blood. Indeed,
some of them,
when
but most of them were
Xian
the
heard that the
bloodstains of
huge
the
beast
magical
was
beasts.
Childine,
And the more
his
they
brows
fought,
creased into a
the
bundle
more
as his
courageous they
gaze
became,
turned vicious.
from the initial apprehension.
If DMO
to the later
Xian
part
was
where it
unable
was
to deal
smooth
with a
sailing.
huge beast,
The
then
five-man
her
team's
brothers,
coordination became
Yiqing
more and more
Luo
tacit.
recalled that
From the
fleeting
initial
figure
frantic
which
killing
disappeared
of
amidst the
magical
surging
beasts
magical
to the
beasts
instantaneous
earlier.
killing
Her gaze
of a
suddenly
magical
turned
beast.
gloomy
At this moment,
as though it was
they
covered
had
with
also
frost.
deeply understood
We've been
what
plotted
Yiqing
against.
Luo had said.
She squeezed
Only
out
through
every
battle
single word
was
from
the only
slits of her
way to
teeth.
become stronger.
Amen.
Fourth-level
DMO
magical
Xian
beasts
responded
were all
calmly as he
intermediate
stared at
level
Childine
magical beasts
without any
with
change
some
in his
high-level
expression.
magical beasts
Childine
mixed in.
is a
As
seventh
compared
level
to the
high-level
third-level
mirage
below,
beast.
their abilities had increased by
is
more than one-fold.
unfathomable.
The youngsters'
Furthermore,
battle speed,
this mirage
because of the
beast's
magical
nature
beast
is
becoming
extremely
stronger,
lazy,
even if the
became
magical
slower
beast
and
forest
slower.
had collapsed.
Group leader,
It might
quickly
not
look,
leave its own
there's another
nest.
group of
If it wasn't
mercenary
for the
group
fact
in
that someone
front.
had used
Suddenly,
extreme methods to
a loud
awaken
and clear man's
Childine from
voice
its
was
nest
heard from not too
and was
far
able to
away.
lead Childine,
Yiqing Luo,
Long
who
Yin
was lazy
Zhan,
by
and the
nature,
rest
would
stood by
not
the
be able to
side,
cross the sixth
carefully
level to
observing
attack
every
them at
youngster's
fifth level.
actions.
Not too
Occasionally
long
opening
later,
their mouths to
those
give some
magical
pointers.
beasts had
Suddenly
already
hearing
dashed
a
to the
stranger's
back of
voice.
Childine.
Instantly,
Yiqing Luo
the
looked
entire
towards the direction
outer
of the
boundary of
voice.
the array barrier
She saw
was
a
surrounded
mercenary
by
group
densely
popping out
packed
from the forest.
magical beasts.
They were dressed
The
in a
magical-colored
blue-beast
mercenary
charged
group
at the
uniform,
barrier one,
and a
after
mercenary
another.
group badge on
After
their
being
chest
bounced
indicated
back,
that they were
another
bronze
wave
plate
of
magical
mercenary
beasts
groups.
charged
Looking
at
at it,
them.
it
When
should be
Blue
100
Dragon
men
Mercenary
group.
Group's members saw this situation
Appearing
all
at
of
the
them were
fourth
dazed.
level,
The
and
array
on the same
barrier was
path
transparent
as them,
and when these
it should be a
magical
high-level
beasts
mission
charged
team
over,
heading towards the
everyone
fifth
couldn't
line.
help but
As soon
touch
as the
their
man
own
finished
bodies,
speaking,
feeling that
a
they were
man
about
with
to
a
be
long
trampled by the
blade in his
magical
hand
beasts
crossed the
Their
forest.
bodies were
The man's
weak,
facial
and
features
many of
were
them had
decent,
already
and his
collapsed.
attire
on the
was
ground,
slightly different
unable
from
to
the other
stand up.
members.
A
Stay
majestic
further away
azure
from
dragon totem
who allowed
was
you to
embroidered
touch
at the
my
bottom
noble
of the man's
body.
clothes.
Just when
From the looks
everyone
of
was
it,
in a state of
this
panic,
man's position
a woman
in this
sharp
mercenary
and
group
angry
was
rebuke
quite high.
suddenly rang
Guild
out.
leader.
Then
These people
he heard a
seemed to be
commotion
heading
towards the
side.
fifth level.
Some
as
of the
well.
Blue Dragon
When that
mercenary
man heard
group's
that,
members,
his
could
brows
not
creased
stand
slightly
steadily
as he
as
squinted
they
his
fell
eyes
to the side.
and impolitely
This piece of
sized
flat
up
ground
Yiqing
was
Luo
not
and
spacious
the
to begin
others.
with. His gaze
After
swept
accommodating
across
more
the
than 100
youths who were
people,
fighting,
it became
and then swept
extremely
across the
crowded.
7 people who were chatting leisurely at the side.
Furthermore,
his eyes were filled
it didn't
with
dare to
disdain.
get too close
They're
to
just a
Yiqing
bunch of
Luo
trash
and
who
the others
overestimate
hence.
themselves.
Those group members
There's no
all
need to
huddled
take them to
together.
heart. When one of them
After
fell,
saying that,
he bumped into
the man
other.
who was addressed,
A few
as
other
the
members
leaders
were
snorted
squeezed
and
out
turned
of the
around
barrier
to return to
and
his
were
team.
instantly torn
Hearing
to
their
shreds
leader say
by the
this,
berserk
the other
magical
members were
beast.
relieved.
Everyone
The
was
useless
horrified.
mercenary group
Once
could
they
not
left the
affect them
barrier,
at all.
what awaited
Since they
them
wouldn't snatch the
would be
quest
nothing
items
left
from
of them.
Then
Blue
they
Dragon
care.
mercenary group's
Yiqing
members
Luo
didn't dare
gave
to
a
move
light
at all.
laugh as
one
her
by
lips
one,
curled
they
upwards
glared
in
at the
ridicule.
person who had stirred up
There were
trouble.
really a lot of
Lonling
arrogant
Nuo.
people.
The current Lonling Nuo was sitting on a huge rock, and Jitsong Tian
Chapter
was surrounding
572.
her. Lonling
Yiqing
Nuo
Luo
didn't put her
straightened her
attention on
long
that
robe.
mercenary group,
Her face
but
filled
swept
with
a glance at the
disgust and
surrounding
disdain.
youngsters who had
What are
placed
you
their
staring
attention
at?
on this side.
If it wasn't
As
for
she
your
spoke
group
out
leader,
coldly, would I even be here
concentrate
today
when you're in battle.
I'm telling you,
Those
if
youngsters
you dare to
immediately
ruin
retracted
this
their
beautiful
gazes
face of mine
as they continue
leaving
to
a scar on
kill
my body,
the magical
my father
beast
will
in front of them.
absolutely not let
Hearing
you
the
off.
lady's clear voice,
The current her didn't
that
have a
blue
single
robe
bit of
group
delicate
leaders from
footsteps
before.
halted. A pair of squinted eyes, filled with disdain, stared at Yiqing Luo.
Chapter
That imposing
5,
manner
87.
made even him
Blue Dragon group's
subconsciously want to
members were
straighten his
so
back and
infuriated
listen
that
to
they were
orders.
trembling.
What was going
Group
on?
leader had brought
Noticing the
Lonling
blue
Nuo
robed group
along
leader's
to complete the
gaze
mission
in
in the
Xiao
magical beast
Yi's
forest, spirited
and that had
eyes
already made them
flashed as her
extremely
eyes revealed
unhappy.
a sliver of
They
ridicule.
were a mercenary group,
and
that
not an
trashy
escort
mercenary
team.
group in
Everyone
front.
knew that
Do you think
group
that just
leader
because you're wearing a
admired
blue
Lonling
dragon
Nuo,
embroidered uniform,
hence he had been asking
you
about
really
her
think
well-being
you're a
along
dragon
the
among
way?
men? Making
From
it
what we
seem as though
see,
he was
you're
an
most
escort
maggots.
team leading a princess
In
on
devil
an outing.
class,
So
they
they
had
all
endured
endured being labeled as
Of
a
course,
trashy
a large
class,
part of it was
unable
because
to
Lonling
retaliate.
Nuo
Now that they
they were
indeed
outside,
beautiful.
they didn't
With such
bear
a
the
beautiful
name of devil
and
class.
alluring young lady,
On what basis did
following
they
the
have to
group,
swallow their
chatting and
anger?
laughing?
After
It
all,
was a good
in
scene.
the eyes of outsiders,
Even if she
there
threw
were
a little
people
tantrum,
who came out from
that would
the
also be
Imperial
called
Palace.
cute.
But
Maggots?
no matter
Saying
how
maggots
beautiful
is an
she
insult
was
to
at this kind of a
maggots.
time where their lives
Xiao
were at
Jin's
stake,
brows
who
rose
could
as his
tolerate
ordinary
her
face
playing with their little
was filled with
tantrums?
ridicule.
Because of
when the other
long
youngsters who were
Ling
killing
Nua's
magical beasts
willfulness,
heard that,
she had
they
pushed a few
immediately
brothers out of
burst
the
out
barrier,
laughing.
and they
These
were
two
torn
people
to
were just
pieces
too
by those
sarcastic.
magical beasts.
A perfectly fine
and she
dragon
didn't feel
was said
a
to be
single bit of
worse than
guilt.
maggots.
She even
The
dared to blame
blue-robed
them.
group leader's
These
face
group members'
turned
hearts were
as
filled
black
with
as
rage
charcoal.
and injustice.
You bunch of trash.
As it instantly
We are the Blue
gushed into
Dragon
their
Mercenary
hearts.
Group.
Even
How
Ji
dare you
Sang
insult
Tian's
us?
expression,
One of the
turned
members
slightly
behind
ugly.
the blue-robed
If a place
group
was
leader's
said to be
face
narrow,
flushed red,
then
as
the
he pointed
others
at
simply
Xiao
didn't
Jin
have a single
and
leg
bellowed
to
in
stand
rage.
on. Considering that Lan
They
Ling
were
Nuo
obviously
was
the
a
mighty
mighty
and
and
domineering
domineering
blue
blue
dragon,
didn't
Yin
wish for her to
Xiao
be touched
he
by
gave
other
out
men.
an exaggerated
He carefully
laugh
made his
and
own group
immediately
members to
covered
leave
her
a
mouth
spot
as a
on
pair
this
of bright
huge rock
and
for her.
beautiful eyes
Forget it if
concealed
Lan
the
Ling
smile.
Nuo didn't
So the
appreciate
so-called
she
Blue
even
Dragon
pushed the
mercenary
other
group
group members aside.
is just a bunch of
As
maggots.
intelligent as
I thought
Lan
this
Ling
mercenary
Nuo
group was
how could
very
she
powerful,
possibly
but
not
I didn't
know the
expect
current
it to be
situation?
just so-so.
How could she not know
After
that
they had
the slightest
established their
movement
mercenary
could
group,
possibly
they had
cause
more
her
or less
to be
paid attention
squeezed
to
out
the
of the other
barrier.
mercenary groups?
Looking at the group members'
this
vengeful
Blue Dragon
gazes
mercenary
towards
group,
Lan Ling
according
Nuo,
to their understanding,
while Lan
was a
Ling Nuo
large-scale
had a
bronze
fearless
plate
look as she
mercenary
stared at
group
him
with
900
arrogantly.
over people.
Ji Tsang
Perhaps they had
Tian
more members,
felt mentally
but because they
tired for no
hadn't
reason.
accumulated
Brother
enough
Tsang
honor
Tian,
points, they were
you're the one who
unable to
coaxed me
advance
and
to
brought
Silver
me
Plate
here.
mercenary group.
Don't tell me.
Hence, there was a
You don't want to take
maximum number of
responsibility?
members.
Blue
Lan
Dragon
Ling
mercenary
Nuo
groups
raised her
backing
teary eyes
seemed to be some
as she
other
looked at
continent's
Ji Tsang
family's group.
Tian.
Because of this,
That
he
look
had a
and her
bit of a
voice was
reputation
filled
in
with
the mercenary
grievance,
guild,
as
He
though
didn't
Ji
expect it
Tsang
to be
Tian had done
such a
something
brainless
to her.
team.
After
Yin
all,
Xiao Yi's
she was the
words
lady whom he had
completely
admired for so
infuriated
many
the
years.
Blue Dragon mercenary
Seeing her
group's
tears and her grievance voice, each of
Ji
them glared
Tsang
at them
Tian's
with a
heart
ferocious
softened.
gaze like
He
that
sighed
of a
helplessly
wild
as he
beast.
stretched out
Not
his
too
hand
long later,
and pulled
100
Lan
people
Ling Nuo
surrounded
into
Yi
his
Qing
embrace.
Luo.
I'll take
and the
responsibility.
others in the center. I'll take
Blue Dragon
responsibility.
mercenary group's
This
group
action
leader,
caused the
Ji
members
Tsang
to
Tian,
widen their eyes.
wiped the blood
They didn't
off his
expect that their
long
brothers
sword
would be
as
torn to
his lips
pieces
curled
by the
into
other
a
magical
smile
beasts
as
as
he
he
looked
looked
at
at this
them
woman's
in
disdain.
willfulness.
His eyes
They
were
didn't even have a
filled with
complete
rage.
corpse.
However,
his regiment
he still
commander
pretended to
was
be
actually
magnanimous.
holding that woman in his
Small
arms.
teams,
Just
don't
because
be
that
too
woman
arrogant.
shed a few
It wasn't
tears.
easy for me to reach the 4th level. If I were to provoke
No matter
someone,
what,
I shouldn't
the members
provoke.
were unable to
It
accept
wouldn't be
it.
worth it.
Looking at the
His
members
words
of
were
the Blue
filled
Dragon
with
mercenary
threat.
group,
Yin
their
Xiao
eyes were
Yi's
burning
smile
with
was
rage
even more
as they
exaggerated
stared at their group
and
leader.
just as she was
and
about to
Lan
open her
Ling Nuo.
mouth,
She
he
was
knew that they
stopped
were
by
having
Yi
an
Qing
internal
Luo.
conflict because of Lan Ling Nuo. The youngsters in the World Group treated it as though they were watching a
573.
farce.
He
Hearing
felt that the
Yi
leader
Qing
of the Blue
Luo's
Dragon
words
group was
Blue
indeed
Dragon
a
mercenary group's members
short-sighted
were
person.
choked till they
For the
couldn't
sake of a
rebuke her.
woman,
Just
he
as the
actually
situation was
disregarded the life
extremely
and
strange,
death of his own
they
brother.
heard rustling
It was no
sounds
wonder that
coming
the
from
group
other end
members
of
would
the
show
forest.
such expressions.
Brother Tsang
They
Tian,
absolutely believed
accompanied
that
by
the
a crisp
same
sound,
thing happened to
a middle-grade
Yi Qing
wolf
Luo
beast
and
slowly
DMO
walked
Xian.
over. On the
Yi
wolf
Qing
beast's
Luo
back
would
sat a
absolutely
young
not
lady
allow
dressed in a
DMO
pink
Xian
silk
to have any
four-link
chance
dress.
to hurt them.
She had
No,
a youthful
that's not
and
right.
beautiful
It
hair
should be said
tied
that the
up as her
overlord would
footwear absolutely not hurt
Looking at
them
the young lady's
because of
dressing,
Madame Qing
Yi
Luo.
Qing Luo's
But Yi
lips
Qing Luo
twitched.
and the
Did this
others
fellow
didn't
come
have the
to the
leisure to
magic
bother
beast
about
forest
Blue
for
Dragon
sightseeing
farce or for
Yi
experience
Qing
learning.
Luo told
Riding on a magic
DMO
beast
and
and
dressed
everything
so
that she'd
heavily
seen earlier.
if they met with
I
danger,
feel that there's a
this set of
possibility
equipment
that it's
would
the
affect
Dark
their
Force's
escape.
doing. Young lady's words are wrong. The young lady's slender eyebrows rose as her tone was
Chapter
arrogant. 5
Brother Tsang Tian,
it's the Dark
isn't
Forces.
bullying your new mercenary
DMO,
group.
Shin's
But
peach
seeing your
blossom
mercenary group
eyes
being
narrowed
so
slightly,
disharmonious,
and that long and narrow
he stood on the
corner of
old
his
mercenary
eyes
group
curled into an
standpoint
arc and gave
It
some
was no
guidance.
longer the usual
While the young
devilish
lady was
charm,
speaking,
but an icy
she casted
chill.
a disdainful
His slightly
glance
narrowed
at Yi
eyes
Qing
reflected
Luo.
a sharp
It wasn't
blade.
hard to tell that
Yi Qing
after she saw
Luo's
Yi
petite
Qing
body
Luo,
froze as
her
she
eyes were
immediately
filled with
followed
jealousy.
DMO
The minute the young lady
Shin's
spoke,
gaze.
This one look
Tian's
made
face
Yi
immediately
Qing
rose
Luo's
into a
pupils
smile as he
dilate
nodded his
in
head.
disbelief.
Sister Nuo
If one didn't
is
look
right.
closely,
This
one
group
wouldn't be
leader
able to tell.
is guiding
on
them.
Child Yin's
That
shoulder.
flattering smile
There
on his
seemed to be a
face
figure
didn't
wearing
attract
a
the
black
young
cloak.
lady Lan
That
Ling Nuo's
was the
attention
disguise
at
of
all.
the Dark
Lan Ling
Forces.
Nuo's pair
Something's
of
not
watery
right.
eyes
Yi
stared
Qing
arrogantly
Luo's
at Yi
slender
Qing
brows
Luo.
creased.
She had always
When
been
the beast
extremely
tide surged
confident
over
towards her
what
own
I saw
looks.
wasn't
in
this
this
figure.
West Continent.
Although
The
it was
most
just a
famous
flash,
beauty was
but she remembered it
Three
clearly.
Springs City's number
Compared
one
to the black
beauty,
cloaked man,
Yi family's
the figure in the
eldest
middle of the
young miss,
magical
Yi Qing
beast
Xian.
was taller.
She had seen her
and more
before,
slender.
and she
It looked a
wasn't
little
as
like a woman.
beautiful as her.
In other words,
she had not expected,
Child Yin was
but today
specially
she met
manipulated
someone
by the Dark
much more
Forces
beautiful
to
than
come
Yi
to the
Qing
fifth level
Xian
to deal with her
than her.
And the beast
Lan Ling
tide
Nuo's
was another
eyes were
wave
filled
of
with people
thick
who
jealousy
kill her, and
Yiqing Luo's brows
her slender
twitched
hands
fiercely for
under
a
her
few times.
sleeves clenched.
She didn't
in a
seem to
fist.
have offended anyone.
She tried her best to
the
control her
extent
tone,
that she
as
had to take
used
her
a
life.
gentle tone.
The beast
few of
tide
you
is
should be
small.
your mercenary
The crux
group's
is
bosses,
that
right?
Childine.
Yiqing
Luo's
Luo's
brows
raised his
rose
hand
as
as
she
she
naturally
naturally
saw the
silky
young
hair.
lady's hostility
If Lil
towards her,
Luo,
as she
were
felt
to
that it
open
was
her mouth.
funny.
I would-
Wanling Nuo
Can you?
continued.
Yiqing
As the core
Luo's
members of the
eyes
team,
lit up as
the
she
team
stared
members are
straight
doing their
into
best to
deep
kill the demonic
Mo
beast.
Xian's
But you
eyes.
guys are leisurely
Deep Mo
chatting
Xian's
and fingers
having
that were
fun at the
caressing
side.
her hair.
Your
curled
team
up
leader has
slightly
bosses like you guys.
as he
It's really-
lightly knocked on
With
her
that,
forehead.
She didn't continue speaking. She only sneered disdainfully. What he meant was that this child to him wasn't a fierce beast. Tian instantly laughed out. The reason why his expression turned ugly was because he was worried that Yi Qing Luo killing magical others would be injured when they were dealing with Childian. That's what a team is. After all, immediately after, he looked at Lan Ling. There was a possibility that his flattering manner was like a puppy that had gotten the bone. Yi Qing Luo clutched her head, but her face was filled with joy and shock. That is to
Lan Ling
say,
Nua's
Xian, your profound
finally
grade is
shifted
not
toward
just
them.
sky profound.
She then flashed a smile
The
and
Xian's
nodded
thin lips
vigorously.
hooked up slightly as he leaned close to her ear. Are they a pair of smile that didn't look like a smile?
The two of them were a perfect match.
If Lil Luo
arrogant
gives me some
and
benefits,
conceited,
I don't mind.
you wouldn't
telling
even know
the
how he
profound
died
grade.
one day.
That warm
Lan
breath
Ling Nua's
faintly
words
brushed
infuriated
past
the
her
surrounding
earlobes.
youths
Yi
who were
Qing
killing
Luo's
magical
cheeks
beasts.
blushed slightly.
One of the small team
as
had
she
just
finished
fist
off the magical
and
beast
punched
in
in
their
their
hands
hands
as they raised their
Not only
weapons
was he a
and
sky
rushed up,
profound supreme,
pointing at
how
Lan
strong
Ling
was
Nua
he?
as they
Obviously,
shouted angrily.
Di Immerse
Who said the team
was
leader
only a few
is
years
older
older
than her?
What's all the team?
An entire
You don't know
Nirvana
anything at
realm.
all.
The
On
number
what
of people
basis
who
were
had
you
reached
slandering
the
our team
profound
leader?
sky realm at his
When
age
one of them opened
could
his
be
mouth,
counted on
the
one
other
hand.
small teams,
Not to
couldn't
mention a
help
Sky
but roar
Shin
out.
Supreme
These youngsters were
martial
still
artist
young
and had
Old
not
man
experienced the affairs
What
of the
realm
world.
is above the
These
sky?
people could slander
Profound
them,
supreme.
but slandering the person
Yi Qing
whom they
Luo
revered
was really
even more
curious.
unacceptable
In her
than
memories,
killing
the
them.
highest realm
Enough
was the
Yi
sky.
Qing Luo's cold
profound realm.
voice was devoid of any emotions. Old Man Tsung muttered to himself for a moment. This old man
Chapter
can only tell you that
574.
above the sky
Vice
profound
Commander,
realm is
those
the
youngsters
sage
retracted
profound
their
realm.
arrogance.
Furthermore,
Under Yi Qing
the grades will be
Luo's
derived
aura.
from 9 grades.
He silently
to 15
returned to
grades,
Yi Qing
and each
Luo's
grade
back.
is divided
Aha,
into 3 levels.
look at that bunch of
The early
trash.
stage,
They're indeed
the middle
trash.
stage,
A member
and
of the
peak
Blue
stage.
Dragon mercenary group.
In other
let
words,
out a
he was
mocking
telling
laugh.
Yi Qing Luo
That's right.
that
Do you think that you're an expert
Xian's current
just because
profound
you've
grade
reached the
was at least at
fourth
the level of
You
sage
still want to go
profound.
against our
As for
Blue
what
Dragon
grade it was, he did
mercenary
not
group?
know.
Is a
Yi
small
Qing
mercenary
Luo's
group
heart
qualified?
trembled fiercely
I really
as
don't
the
know
gaze she
what these
shot
pieces
at
of trash
Di
are doing
Immerse
here.
was
They are as
filled
timid
with
as
a sliver
mice.
of worship.
The sounds of
expected
ridicule
of her man,
caused the
he
rage
was actually
that the
so
youths had
powerful
suppressed with great
as for the
difficulty
profound
to
rank
surge up
after
again.
that.
This was
Wait
especially
until you've
so for
surpassed the sky
Xiaojing.
profound realm.
He held the coin
Then
dart
you'll
in his
naturally
hand
know.
tightly.
After
and
Old
was
Man
about to throw it at
Tsung
those people
finished
who were mocking
He
him.
didn't say
But he was
anything
stopped
else.
by Yi Qing
It was
Luo
obvious that he
Forget
didn't
it.
intend to say
We were only
anything
at the
more.
fourth level.
Yi Qing
The fifth
Luo
level
didn't
magical
ask
beasts are
any
more
further.
dangerous.
She
Don't
hadn't even
waste your
broken
energy
because
through
of
the
these
earth
rubbish.
profound realm.
The youths
Not
were
to mention
startled,
the
and
profound
anger
rank
on their
after the
faces
sky
dissipated.
profound realm.
That's right.
Everything.
Their purpose
when
in
she
coming
reached
to the
that
magical
stage,
beast forest
she would
was to
naturally
train
know.
and complete the mission.
It was not worth it for them to waste their energy on the Blue Dragon mercenary group
Chapter
before
589.
they even reached the
Di
fifth
Immerse's
level.
brows
The so-called
rose
forbearance
slightly as he
was
understood
not
the
a sign of
meaning
weakness.
behind
It was
Yi
because they
Qing
knew
Luo's
how
words.
to judge the
She
situation
wanted to give it a try
and make the
to
best
try to
choice
deal
for
with this
themselves.
Childine.
Yi Qing
Even if he was
Luo's
unable
voice
to kill
wasn't
Childine,
loud,
nor was it
battling
soft.
with a seventh
Blue
level
Dragon
high-level
mercenary
mirage
group
beast
naturally
would
heard
definitely be
clearly.
able to raise his own
Trash?
ability. How
This,
dare she call them trash?
was exactly how
Yi
Yi
Qing
Qing
Tian's
Luo's
eyes
in
widened
Di
in anger
Immerse.
as his disgust.
She had placed her
towards
life
Yi
in
Qing
Di
Luo deepened.
Immerse's
However,
hands.
Yi Qing
So what if
Luo
Childine
really
was
brought
powerful,
those youngsters
whether he
along,
could do it or not,
as though she
he would
totally
only know
disregarded
after he
them
tried.
as she walked straight
Especially
ahead.
such
The
a
youths
rare
passed by them one
opportunity.
by one.
How could Yi
Ji
Qing
Tian
Luo
bear
felt
to let
the
it go?
burning pain
If she
on his
really
face,
couldn't do it,
as
then
though his
Di
pride had been
Immerse
stepped
would
into
do
the
it.
mud by the other
Yi
party.
Qing Luo
Instantly,
narrowed her crafty
a strand
eyes
of
as her little
profound
hand hooked
energy
onto his
burst
smooth
out of his
lower
body.
jaw.
He
Of course,
brandished
don't
a
think
long
of just
sword in his
standing by
hand,
the side to watch.
chopping towards
that
Yi
black
Qing
cloak
Luo.
man. I'll
Yi
leave it to
Qing
you.
Luo
The people from the dark
narrowed her
forces
eyes as her
actually
heart
dared to
suddenly
show
felt
themselves.
warm.
If
He
they
then
didn't
saw
leave something
Ji Tsong
behind,
Tian's
how could they let them go
profound
so
heart
easily? Which was flickering with
TSK,
orange light.
TSK.
Looking at
You're
the
so
star pattern
assured
under
of
his
me?
feet,
Although
it showed
Di
his
Immerse's
profound
rank
words were filled with
profound
grievance.
rank
His
too.
eyes were
Looking
filled
at
with
Ji
adoration,
Tsong Tian's
which
age,
obviously
he was at
indicated
most
that he was in a good
25
mood.
or 26.
Yi Qing Luo
He had already reached the
believed in his
second level
ability,
of the earth,
and this was the
profound
biggest
realm.
affirmation.
It was no
towards
wonder
him.
that he was so
The two of
arrogant.
them flirted with
Yi
each
Qing
other.
Luo
in a low
muttered to
voice.
herself
Their obvious
irresolutely.
display of
It seemed that she
affection
had to raise her
blinded the
profound
eyes of the
rank
members
as
of the
soon
Blue
as
Dragon
possible.
group.
Otherwise,
Especially
she
Lan
wouldn't be
Ling
able to catch up
Nuo,
with
who
the
was
others.
nestled in Ji.
Just relying on his
Tsong's
footwork work
arms.
and teleportation
Her entire face
was not
was
a
twisted,
long-term solution.
malevolent,
When
and
Jitsun
terrifying.
Tian's
A
long
nameless
saber
flame of jealousy
slashed down,
rose
a loud
in
dawn was heard as a
Wan
gold
Ling
coin
Nuo's
dart
heart.
flew past.
She wanted to pull Yi
hitting the
Qing
long
Luo,
saber.
who was nestled in Mo
The
Xian's
strong
arms
force
out.
forced
Not
Ji,
wanted to see
Song
any other woman in
Tian's
that
long
position.
blade to
This thought
deviate
caused
as his
Lan
arm
Ling
was so
Nuo's
numb
heart
that he
to
almost
tremble.
dropped his long blade onto
Could it
the
be
ground.
that she had feelings
the
for
moment
that
he made his
ordinary
move,
looking man?
The members of the
Actually,
Blue Dragon mercenary
although the
group
man's
were
appearance
not
was
gonna
rather
let him
ordinary,
His
with a shout,
eyes and temperament
he charged
were like
forward.
that of a banished
The world
immortal.
group's youngsters
If one only looked
naturally
at her
wouldn't
back,
allow them
it would
to
be a
bully
beautiful
them
scene
as they raised their weapons to
Furthermore,
block
his
their
embrace
attacks.
was
For a
extremely
moment,
wide.
the entire
and
fourth
firm.
line became
She had an
chaotic.
urge to stay.
The two teams
in that
were
embrace
entangled
forever.
together.
She wanted to
Luo's
countless
slender
thoughts
brows
surged
creased
slightly as she
when these thoughts
and
ran through her mind like
moved
crazy.
closer to the fifth
Lan
level.
Ling Nua's
Yi
expression
Qing Luo
suddenly
transmitted her voice
and she
through
hurriedly
the mercenary group
brainwashed
badge.
herself.
All
No,
brothers moved
impossible.
closer to the fifth
She
level.
was just
Shake
unwilling.
them off.
But this man
If
was
these
actually
people really
not
got
charmed
involved,
by her beauty.
it would
She
definitely
was
be
jealous
a
of Yi
huge
Qing
problem.
Luo.
It was the
It
last
must
day of
be
holiday,
because the man whom
and
she
Yi
was
Qing
unable
Luo
to seduce
didn't
had
want to
been
waste any
seduced
more time.
by Yi Qing
Unexpectedly.
Luo.
That's right.
Lan Ling Nua,
Hey,
who was riding
you
on the
useless
wolf
beast,
beast, also
why are you
commanded
still
the wolf
standing
beast
there
to
like a
move
fool?
towards
Aren't they
this
very
direction
powerful?
at the same time.
There are so
Lan
many
Ling
magical
Nua
beasts.
felt that in the
Aren't you going to
chaotic
kill them?
battle,
Lan Ling Nua
inevitably be
screeched
hurt.
at Yi
She
Qing
dressed up
Luo's
so
direction.
exquisitely
Her
today
beautiful eyes
in order
were
to raise
filled
the
with anger.
Blue Dragon
Are we going to
mercenary
be trapped
group's
here
looks,
with you bunch of
not
trash
intending
today?
to make a move.
We're going back to
On
the
seeing
academy
Yi
tomorrow.
Qing Luo and a man hiding in this direction.
If we don't make
Lan
it back
Ling
in time
I'll
and
naturally
break my
follow along.
excellent attendance record, I won't forgive you. At the mention of the academy, the other group members all started talking at once. Yes, tomorrow we have to go to the academy. We can't be trapped here. If our credits are deducted, we won't be able to graduate. Are we going to be trapped here today? Academy? These mercenaries were also from the academy? Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes as she sized them up. These people's faces were unfamiliar to her. If they were Heavenly Academy students, she would definitely have an impression of them. These people should be students from other academies. Indeed, Lan Ling Nua stood up and stood on the huge rock, looking down at Yi Qing Luo's direction. Chapter 590. We're all Heaven class students in Lady Phoenix Academy, and if half of the students in the class don't make it back to the academy tomorrow, the academy will definitely investigate our whereabouts, and by then, our respective families will be alerted. Lan Ling Nua's beautiful face revealed a smirk of arrogance. I advise you to escort us out of the magic beast forest safely. Otherwise, the minute the academy and families find their way here, you will absolutely not be able to bear the consequences. Hearing Lan Ling Nua's words, Yi Qing Luo almost burst out laughing. Who gave this fool such confidence? Who made this fool to be so arrogant? Stand out. She absolutely wouldn't slap her face. Sentence after sentence of threats. She really treated herself as something. As a woman, how could Yi Qing Luo possibly not tell that Lan Ling Nua's eyes, which was unable to conceal? Jealousy? Yi Qing Luo really laughed out loud at this moment. She raised her eyes and stared at the man beside her as she shook her head helplessly. This man's charm was unstoppable. He had already disguised himself into such an ordinary look. Yet he was still able to capture the heart of Lan Ling Nua, who thought she was the most beautiful woman in the entire world. She had no choice but to admire Dmo Xian's charm. Dmo Xian put on an innocent look as he shrugged and shook his head. I didn't do anything. If you do anything, she will become even crazier. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows rose slightly as her charming eyes swept towards Lan Ling Nua. After some time, she revealed an arc which didn't look like a smile. This arc was filled with an icy chill. Following that, Yi Qing Luo placed her hands behind her back as she strolled towards Lan Ling Nua. That arrogant and condescending, imposing manner forced the surrounding Blue Dragon Group's members to open up a path. Who do you think you are? The World Group is powerful and incredible, but if we don't kill these magical beasts, what can you do to us? That devastatingly beautiful face was obviously smiling, but the words that she spat out made one feel as though they were in an ice house. Immediately after, Yi Qing Luo continued, If you don't want to be trapped together with us, then scram out of our enchantment. If you don't want to break your academy's excellent attendance record, then scram out of our enchantment. As for your academy, your families, and whatnot, what has it got to do with us? Now, I am suspecting that these magical beasts were attracted by your Blue Dragon mercenary group. Sentence after sentence was spat out from Yi Qing Luo's mouth icily. There was a hint of disdain in her eyes as she sneered. Her smile grew wider as she said, Trash that relies on us to survive. Who gave you the guts to shout here? The last sentence was said by Yi Qing Luo word by word, and it was directed at Lanling Nuo. Anyone who dared to covet her, Yi Qing Luo's man, had to see if she agreed to it or not. She even dared to slander him time and time again. Did she really think that everyone had to love her? Yi Qing Luo had never talked about such feelings before, but in her understanding, the so-called love could not tolerate the slightest grain of sand. Between her and Dmo Xian, she would absolutely not allow anyone to come between them. Even if Dmo Xian didn't have any feelings for Lanling Nuo and couldn't even remember what Lanling Nuo looked like. But she wouldn't allow it. You could say that she was overbearing or selfish, but to her, feelings were just like that. You. Lanling Nuo was choked by Yi Qing Luo as her face flushed red, as she was so stunned that she couldn't even say a single word of rebuttal. Lanling Nuo was obviously standing on the huge rock, wanting to say that she was able to suppress Yi Qing Luo's arrogance by looking down at her. But at this moment, she was so intimidated by Yi Qing Luo that she started to tremble. Chapter 591. Miss, your words are too serious. Ji Tian eventually couldn't bear to see his beloved woman being bullied by others as he went up to pull Lanling Nuo into his arms. Is it serious? Yi Qing Luo gave a light laugh as her brows were filled with coquettish charm. You who depend on us to survive, when you're arrogantly ordering us around, why don't you say it's serious? Ji Tian's words were dry as his face turned steely green. Young lady, we are Celestial Phoenix Academy students, and I'm East Water Continent's Ji family's young master. Sister Nuo is the East Water Monarch's sister. On account of our Ji family and the royal family's face, today's matter. Before he could finish his words, he saw Yi Qing Luo raising her palm to stop his words. Following that, the feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's fingertips moved and a bewitching red glow pressed towards him. Ji Tian had not expected Yi Qing Luo to make a move just like that, as he was stunned momentarily, and in his fluster, he hugged Lanling Nuo as he turned around and leapt up. However, he had forgotten that he was currently in a spirit formation. With this leap, he leaped out of the spirit formation. A pungent stench entered their noses. The deafening howls of the demonic beasts pierced their eardrums. Countless birds and beasts pounced on the two of them like lightning upon seeing them leap out of the spirit formation. They were so densely packed that the two of them turned pale with fright. Luckily, Ji Tian's reaction was swift as he immediately returned to the array barrier. Just as he was about to explode his anger towards Yi Qing Luo, he saw that enchanting woman holding a cold arc with a smile that didn't look like a smile, her feather fan pressed against her pink lips as she laughed lightly. What has your status got to do with me? Just a few simple words were enough to inflict a heavy blow on the two of them. All along, he had thought that his incomparably noble identity, in Yi Qing Luo's eyes, couldn't even stir up a single ripple. Could it be this woman's status was even higher than theirs? It was no wonder that they didn't know Yi Qing Luo's identity. They had only heard of the World Group's name, but were unable to investigate the information of the World Group's members. Because before this, no one had ever seen this group of youths. As for Yi Qing Luo's identity and the news of these youngsters coming out from the Imperial Palace, only the people in West Continent's Three Springs City knew about it. Ji Tian hugged Lanling Nuo, as his pride had been unknowingly trampled into dregs by Yi Qing Luo. However, at this moment, he couldn't say a single word. He was completely stunned by Yi Qing Luo's imposing manner. However, Lanling Nuo was relentless. She had never suffered such humiliation before. Ever since she was a child, she had been the proud daughter of the heavens. Relying on her beautiful face, her life in the East Continent had been smooth sailing. She could be called a queen whose status was second only to her cousin, Jun Immerse, who didn't bow and scrape when they saw her. Why was he humiliated by an unknown nobody in the Western Continent? Well done. How dare you look down on the dignity of our eastern continent's imperial family. Lanling Nuo popped her head out from Jitsong Tian's arms as her face was filled with anger. Just you wait. Wait till I return to East Continent. I want my royal cousin to send troops to invade your West Continent. Sister Nuo. Jitsong Tian pressed down on Lanling Nuo's head as his brows creased tightly as he cried out in a low voice. Stop talking. You're afraid of her, but I'm not. Lanling Nuo's chest heaved up and down as she couldn't help but grumble that Jitsong Tian was a big coward. If they were to lose today, wouldn't it make West Continent's people think that their East Continent was easy to bully? Thinking in this way, Lanling Nuo's expression turned even gloomier. But her words had just ended when she felt a gust of cold wind blowing against her face and immediately felt an icy coldness on her neck. Not knowing when, Yiqing Luo was already standing in front of her. Chapter 592. Lanling Nuo looked down and saw a slender wrist that was as smooth as jade. The slender fingers were tightly wrapped around her neck. The coldness of his fingertips was like ice melting on her neck. Lanling Nuo's petite body suddenly stiffened as her pupils enlarged, staring at Yiqing Luo in disbelief. How did Yiqing Luo appear in front of her? And how did he choke her? Jitsong Tian was actually sent flying. Before she could even react, she was restrained by Yiqing Luo. At this very moment, Lanling Nuo deeply felt Yiqing Luo's power. She absolutely believed that Yiqing Luo wasn't simply trying to scare her. He really did not put her status in his eyes at all. He really wanted to kill her. Lanling Nuo was scared. Her beautiful face was pale with fright, and her entire body started to tremble. Seeing her in this state, Yiqing Luo's brows revealed a sweet arc, as she was extremely enchanting. Today you're standing on our West Continent soil. Even if you're the emperor, you'll have to be obedient. Following that, Yiqing Luo's 5 fingers suddenly increased the strength. Lanling Nuo widened her eyes in terror. She kept extending her hands, trying to pry open the clamp on her neck. But she didn't even have the chance to move, let alone lift her hand. Jitsong Tian saw this, and his eyes were filled with pain. He wanted to go up to help Lanling Nuo, but after the group members supported him, they held onto his arms. The arrogant and willful Lanling Nuo indeed needed someone to take her down a peg. It was also time to let Lanling Nuo know that not everyone should revolve around her. Either shut up or get lost, or I'll throw you out right now. Yiqing Luo didn't have any protective feelings for the fairer sex as she dropped this sentence and released her hand. Without Yiqing Luo's support, Lanling Nuo's entire person was like a pile of mud, softly lying on the huge rock. Her beautiful face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and there was even a hint of ashen. Filled with resentment, Lanling Nuo didn't dare to speak another word. No one stood on her side, and no one was willing to speak up for her. Even Jitsong Tian didn't speak up for her. Lanling Nuo felt that the whole world had betrayed her. Obviously all these were Jitsong Tian's fault. It was Jitsong Tian who brought her to the magical beast forest without any explanation, and it was Jitsong Tian who admired her beauty. On what basis was it that when something happened to her, he didn't care about her at all? Lanling Nuo's eyes were filled with intense hatred, and her facial features were hideous and twisted. Jitsong Tian, who was originally standing by the side, preparing to head up to appease Yiqing Luo after she left, when he saw her in this state, he instantly shuddered. Was this still the smart and kind Sister Nuo in his heart? When he saw those eyes filled with hatred, he trembled with fear. At the same time, at the entrance to the first level of the magical beast forest, more than a dozen men in black clothes were hiding in the forest with sharp broadswords in their hands. The leader of the group was a black-robed man. Although he was also dressed in black, the material he was wearing was obviously smooth silk, which was of a much higher grade than the other black-robed men. Furthermore, the black-clothed man was wearing a jade crown inlaid with a few gems. He stood in front of the 10 over black-robed men as he stuck his head out to look towards the direction of the entrance, as though he was waiting for something. Fourth young master, You'd better rest in the forest for a while. We'll keep a close watch on you." A black-robed man behind spoke out speechlessly. They were assassins. Assassins. Chapter 593. Having such a silly master, they started to doubt if they could complete today's assassination mission. "Don't worry about me. The moment I think about how I can hold Yi-Ching Luo, that little slut, in my palm and play with her however I want, I feel delighted." That black-robed man, who was addressed as Fourth Young Master, gave a sinister sneer as he clenched the long sword in his hand, as though he recalled the scene which he had described. He raised his head and laughed heartily. 10 overkillers. This Fourth Young Master wasn't anyone else but Yuchi family's Fourth Young Master, Yuchiya. Yuchi family's patriarch had lost his face in front of so many commoners and became the joke of the entire Three Spring City. How could Yuchi family's patriarch take this line down? So he naturally pushed all the blame onto Yi-Ching Luo. Yesterday, on account of Mu Zifan's Alchemist Guild's chief token, he let Yi-Ching Luo off. But today, he absolutely must kill Yi-Ching Luo. Hence, he sent his secret guards to the mansion early in the morning to inquire about the World Group's whereabouts. Then he heard that they were going to the Magic Beast Forest to complete a mission. What kind of place was the Magic Beast Forest? That was a place where danger lurked in all directions, and if they were not careful, they would lose their lives there. They only needed to kill Yi-Ching Luo and the others after she came out. If Yi-Ching Luo and the others died, the outsiders would only think that they had met with danger while they were completing a mission in the Magic Beast Forest. Who would suspect the Yuchi family? When Yuchi family's patriarch instructed the killers, it was coincidentally heard by Yuchiya. He and Yi-Ching Luo originally had an irreconcilable enmity and had been looking for an opportunity to take revenge on her. But unfortunately, Yi-Ching Luo had entered the Heavenly Academy and was locked in the academy for a month, so where would he get the chance to take revenge? This time round, Yi-Ching Luo had offended the entire Yuchi family. His father would definitely not let Yi-Ching Luo off, and after crossing hands, he knew Yi-Ching Luo and the other's skills and ability. The killers he sent out would definitely be top-rated experts. Yuchiya immediately volunteered and led 10 over high-leveled killers to wait outside the Magic Beast Forest. Those killers racked their brains and discussed if they should directly knock Yuchiya unconscious and wake him up after the mission was completed. Suddenly, they heard Yuchiya's cry of shock. Someone is coming out. It's a person." Saying this, Yuchiya's entire head shrank back into the thicket. The other assassins immediately held their breaths and hid in the dark. Sure enough, a figure dressed in a long black robe appeared at the entrance that was filled with dense foliage and eerie yin-chi. That figure was extremely slender, and one could tell at a glance that it was a woman. Yuchiya's brows creased tightly. Could it be that Yi-Ching Luo knew that there were killers lying in ambush at the entrance and intentionally used this method to avoid detection? Just as he was about to charge forward and restrain the woman, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. However, he discovered that after the woman walked out of the entrance, there was a large group of giant magical beasts following closely behind her. The magical beasts stopped at the edge of the entrance and did not step out. Even if Yuchi didn't understand the ways of the world, he still knew that each and every one of those magical beasts were at least mid-level or above. There were also quite a number of high-level magical beasts mixed in. Magical beasts also had their own rules of survival. These mid to high-level magical beasts would never come below the 3rd tier. Not only was Yuchi stupefied, even those experienced and knowledgeable assassins behind him were stupefied. This was the first time they saw so many mid to high-level magical beasts appearing at the entrance of the Magic Beast Forest. Looking at it, there were at least 20 over of them. This woman was absolutely not Yi-Ching Luo. Chapter 594. The black-robed lady could control a group of beasts. She was absolutely not an ordinary lady. Yuchi had totally treated this lady as an otherworldly expert, as even his breathing became cautious, afraid that the lady would discover them. Luckily, the lady bade farewell to those magical beasts and immediately turned around to leave. The lady had just turned around when coincidentally a light breeze blew over. The lady's black robe on her head was lifted, revealing half of her exquisite and beautiful side face, as well as a black arc at the corner of her eyes, which made her look extremely amorous. That was... Yuchi felt as though he was struck by lightning as he stared at that lady in disbelief. Even though her makeup had changed, he could still recognize her at one glance. Wasn't she? Within the array barrier, Blue Dragon Mercenary Group's atmosphere had sunk into a state of low spirits. The group members, group leader, and Lan Ling Nu all developed feelings of rejection. On the contrary, on Yi Qing Luo's side, all the youngsters stood quietly on the spot, without the group leader or vice group leader's instructions. No one spoke up first, and no one moved at all, quietly waiting for them to think of a way. Yi Qing Luo discussed her and Dmo Xian's plan with Long Yunzhan and the others. When everyone heard that this huge beast was Child Yin from the 7th level, their expressions turned ugly. 7th level, that was the legendary level. In the entire West Continent, they had only heard of it, but had never seen it before. A mirage beast which had walked out from the legendary level. Moreover, it was a high-level mirage beast. It was imaginable how difficult it was to deal with. Although Qiao Jin felt that doing this was too risky, and if they were not careful, they could easily lose their lives. But in the end, he couldn't resist Yi Qing Luo's insistence. He took a look at the Overlord and realized that the Overlord didn't say a word with a calm expression, so he finally compromised. The Overlord valued Yi Qing Luo more than anyone else, and with him around, nothing would happen. After the few of them agreed, Yi Qing Luo then turned around and looked at those young faces behind her as she smiled faintly. Group leader, and I will deal with the huge beast. The surrounding beast tide will be handed over to you and those from Blue Dragon Group. No problem, right? Although these words were said to the World Group's youngsters, but in actual fact, it was said for Blue Dragon Group's members. Jitsong Tian was stunned as he turned his head to look outside the array barrier. Those fierce-looking magical beasts were slightly terrified as they hesitated, not daring to respond. These were magical beasts, batches of mid to high-level magical beasts. At least, there were over 100 of them. They could deal with one or two, but with so many magical beasts, weren't they just sending themselves to death? There was no response from the other side, so how would Yi Qing Luo not understand what Blue Dragon Group was thinking? She sneered, "If you want to live, then rely on your own strength to rush out of danger. Otherwise, just wait to become the food of these magical beasts. The barrier can't last forever." Following that, Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered to interact with them any further as she directly told the World Group's youngsters about some matters to take note of. For example, the surroundings were filled with trees. He could make use of the trees to nimbly avoid the demonic beasts before launching an attack. It was also commonly known as a kite. For example, although magical beasts had their own consciousness, they were still magical beasts. The figure that led the horde of beasts was no longer nearby, which meant that there was no one commanding these magical beasts. These demonic beasts were definitely attacking randomly. All they had to do was to attack the low-level magical beasts in an orderly manner, defeating them one by one, and disrupting the entirety of the magical beasts. These little tricks were easy to say, but how much they could comprehend would depend on the comprehension ability of these youths. Chapter 595. Child Yin's body was tall and sturdy, like a huge mountain. It sensed Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian's appearance. Or perhaps its target was the both of them. With a leap, it pounced towards them. This was as though a huge mountain was collapsing right in front of them. Yi Qing Luo and Dmo Xian's gazes met, and the both of them flipped sideways at the same time. One struck towards Child Yin's head while the other turned into a black shadow, and in a blink of an eye, it had already merged into the air. Yiqing Luo's figure was outstanding as the feather fan on her fingertips kept on spinning, stirring up thousands of miles of wind as it shot out numerous silver wires, winding around Child Yin's head. Those few silver wires directly wound around Child Yin's neck, winding several rounds. Just as Yiqing Luo was preparing to tighten the silver wires, she saw Child Yin's two huge and sturdy arms' muscles tensing up. A loud sound was heard as those iron wires directly broke apart. Boom, boom, boom. Child Yin's legs smashed heavily onto the ground. In a split second, the earth quaked and the mountain swayed as the ground started to crack, revealing many cracks. Even the people in the array barrier couldn't help but be affected. Everyone was shaken till they were on the verge of collapsing, almost falling out of the array barrier. Some of the surrounding magical beasts weren't able to evade in time as they fell right into the cracks which had opened up. Momentarily, the entire 5th level had sunk into unprecedented chaos. At this moment, Long Yunjian and the others moved. Their movements were agile and their speed was extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning, as they charged towards Child Yin. Seeing the group leader and the other bosses starting to move, the world group's youngsters remembered what Yiqing Luo said earlier as they all started to join the battle. Now was the best opportunity to attack. The ground kept on cracking. Those magical beasts' speed was fast, and they had intelligence, but between the same species, there would always be cases of mutual biting and brawling. Not to mention that right now, there were various kinds of magical beasts gathered together. Under the situation where there was no one to command them, the magical beasts sensed danger from the cracks in the ground and didn't care if the opposite party was a friend or foe. All they cared about was biting and killing. Magical beasts' desire to live was much stronger than humans. After Imo Han dashed out of the enchantment, he speedily stepped on a magical beast which was stuck in a crack on the ground. With a wave of his long sword, he swiftly chopped off the magical beast's head. They had one morale for this battle with the demonic beasts. The youngsters in the world group felt their blood boiling as their eyes brimmed with hope and determination of youth. This scene made the members of the Blue Dragon group feel that the passion that had been extinguished by the mission and the development of the mercenary group seemed to have returned. He'd cultivated to become a profounder and joined a mercenary group because he wanted to become strong and prove his ability. Who doesn't have their own dream of being a hero? Looking at the fearless youths killing the demonic beasts in front of them in an orderly manner, Zhang Xian felt a chill run down his spine. In their hearts, a surge of passionate blood was rippling. Leader, leader. Numerous group members turned their gazes towards Ji Songtian. They wanted to go out and fight. They wanted to leave the barrier and fight for themselves, for the mercenary group. That female group leader of the world group was right. If he wanted to live, he would have to rely on his own strength to rush out of danger and work hard to find an opportunity to survive. The barrier couldn't possibly last for an entire lifetime. Even if it could last for an entire lifetime, they couldn't possibly stay in the barrier forever, not going anywhere at all. Jitsong Tian was the same. He naturally heard Yiqing Luo and the others' discussion. That huge beast was a high-level mirage beast, which came from the 7th level. Even a Sky Mystic Overlord Strong exponent was unable to kill it. Chapter 596. It was the same for the others. Didn't they know that a high-leveled mirage beast from the 7th level wasn't something that people like them could go against? No, they knew. They knew the dangers of going against high-leveled mirage beasts, but they still charged up without any hesitation, because they trusted each other, willing to attempt to cross hands with danger, willing to challenge the impossible. This was the true way of a strong practitioner. Jitsong Tian recalled how he ridiculed the world group as a trash group, ridiculing Yiqing Luo and the others for only knowing how to chat leisurely while making his own group members do the mission. So he was extremely ashamed. Just as he was about to open his mouth, his chest was suddenly tugged by someone, and following that, he heard a lady's gentle voice trembling, "Don't go. Brother Song Tian, don't go. Lan Ling Nuo suppressed the anger in her eyes as she tried her best to put on a frightened look as one hand hugged Ji Song Tian's waist tightly. Her other hand was holding onto Ji Song Tian's lapel as she buried her soft petite body into his embrace. She absolutely could not let Ji Song Tian help that trash group. Recalling everything that Yi Qing Luo had done to her earlier, Lan Ling Nuo's heart was filled with rage. From what she saw, Blue Dragon Group's members leaving the array barrier to kill the other magical beast was helping that wretched woman. That wretched woman was her enemy, which meant that she was also Ji Song Tian's enemy, which meant that she was the entire Blue Dragon Mercenary Group's enemy. I'll accompany you. Ji Song Tian's hand, which was holding his lapel, was soft as though it had no bones, carrying a lady's fragrance. Ji Song Tian's heart was pounding furiously as he lowered his eyes and looked at the lady in his arms affectionately. Suddenly, he was grateful for this accident. His sister Nuo had already started to rely on him and knew how to automatically snuggle up to him. Did this mean that Lan Ling Nuo had actually liked him all along? This thought made Ji Song Tian's lips uncontrollably curl into a smile as his palm tightened, hugging the delicate lady even tighter. Sister Na, don't be afraid. Brother Song Tian will always be by your side. The surrounding group members were still waiting for Ji Song Tian's command. Originally being infected by the World Group's youngsters and being hot-blooded, when he saw this scene filled with deep emotions, the hot-blooded blood in his heart was suddenly extinguished. As a result, they became even more disgusted with Lan Ling Nuo. It was already a matter of life and death, yet she was still displaying her princess temper. Did she really think that she was still in the East Continent's imperial palace, that she was still that spoiled and willful Princess Ling Nuo? At first, he thought that Lan Ling Nuo was intelligent and likable. Now he felt that Lan Ling Nuo was as dumb as a pig. They simply couldn't be bothered to ask for Ji Song Tian's opinion. Anyway, their group leader was prepared to accompany this willful little princess. He gripped his weapon tightly and prepared to rush out of the barrier. Stop! Lan Ling Nuo suddenly popped her head out from Ji Song Tian's arms as she stared coldly at those group members. All of you are not allowed to go. Stay here with me. Princess Ling Nuo, Sister No. Group members and Ji Song Tian opened their mouths at the same time. The group members couldn't understand the princess's train of thought. They were flirting with each other here. Did they need someone else to accompany them? Ji Song Tian was astonished as his handsome brows creased slightly. Sister Nuo, don't worry, I alone can protect you. He thought that Lan Ling Nuo didn't believe in his own ability. Chapter 597 F***K. The group members' hearts were filled with curses as they wanted to burst out with vulgarities. Was there something wrong with this princess's brain? In the past, they thought that Lan Ling Nuo was intelligent or whatever. They were absolutely blind. Looking at the anger in the group members' eyes and their tightly clenched fists, Lan Ling Nuo's expression changed slightly as she immediately buried her head into Ji Song Tian's arms as she sobbed. Brother Song Tian, Brother Song Tian, I don't allow you to help that slut. I don't allow it. She was sobbing softly as she whimpered in grievance. Every now and then, she would raise her eyes, which were stained with tears, as she looked pitifully at Ji Song Tian. I know that you've taken a fancy to that slut's beauty, and you feel that she's beautiful. You want to save her and help her. Brother Song Tian, tell me, have you also taken a fancy to that slut? Don't you want no anymore? This round of unreasonable pestering made the surrounding group members' mouths agape as their faces were filled with disbelief as their jaws almost dropped onto the ground. What on earth was Lan Ling Nuo thinking about in her mind? Leaving the array barrier to kill the magical beasts was helping the world group? What was she thinking? Damn it, they went out to kill the magical beasts, obviously for the sake of survival, for the entire Blue Dragon mercenary group. However, Ji Song Tian's attention was placed on Lan Ling Nuo's last sentence. Don't want her anymore? How could he possibly bear to not want her? Jitsong Tian's heart was melted by Lanling Nua's tears. His large palm gently patted Lanling Nua's back as he spoke in a gentle tone. How could that be? How could I possibly take a fancy to another woman? Sister Nua, you know that from the moment I met you 4 years ago, I've always been admiring you. The feelings which had always been suppressed in his heart finally came out. Jitsong Tian's heart was pounding like thunder. He waited anxiously for Lanling Nua's reply. Lanling Nua stared with a pair of misty eyes as she blinked, and a shade of red instantly surfaced on her face as she buried herself into Jitsong Tian's arms. She didn't reply, but her actions were the best answer. Jitsong Tian was so excited that he was about to scream out. His arms hugged Lanling Nua tightly. The woman whom he had admired for so many years had finally agreed to become his woman. Commander, are we really just going to sit here and wait for death? One of the members clenched his fists tightly and shouted in a low, gruff voice. Let's talk about it later. Jitsong Tian replied without even turning his head back. In other words, none of them were allowed to leave the barrier. None of them were allowed to leave the barrier. Leader, the group members trembled in disbelief. They couldn't understand how their leader could be so mesmerized by beauty. Didn't you hear what your sister-in-law said? Not to let you help the world group? Jitsong Tian's voice suddenly turned gloomy as his imposing aura started to spread out as he berated them. In the world group, he had already lost his face in front of Lanling Nua. He absolutely couldn't let Lanling Nua feel that he couldn't even control his own brother. The guild members gripped the weapons in their hands tightly and sat back down on the cracked ground without saying a word. They were mercenaries. The most important thing for a mercenary was to obey orders. This scene was caught by Yi Qing Luo, who was dealing with Childine from afar. There was no other expression on her face, only a disdainful sneer. It was no wonder that after developing to 900 over people, they were still a bronze plate mercenary group. No matter how strong their ability was, they were still a failure as humans. Under this kind of situation, they had already lost their lives, but they still had the leisure to flirt around. She was indeed a femme fatale. Yi Qing Luo scoffed softly as her gaze refocused onto the huge mountain like Childine. Chapter 598. That black-cloaked man didn't escape speedily this time round because he had been discovered. On the contrary, he met DMO Xian's attack head-on as he struck out a burst of powerful black chi. That black chi was like a soft snake as it coiled towards DMO Xian. Apparently, the black-cloaked man had 100% confidence that he could kill everyone present. DMO Xian's expression remained calm, and when the black chi coiled around him, he stretched out his finger and made a casual sweep. That black chi instantly dissipated. Following that, DMO Xian's black hair, which was like smoke, spread out on his shoulders as it fluttered without any wind. He was dressed in black, and that bundle of cherry blossom totem on his arm, under this scenario, seemed to have turned into a real flame as it kept on burning. In just a blink of an eye, that flame had already enveloped the black, cloaked man, as though he was using fire to burn the other party. In the array barrier, Blue Dragon Mercenary Group's members were simply dumbstruck as they watched. Who on earth were these people? Who was that black cloak man? Furthermore, that black cloak man seemed to have been flipped down from Childine's shoulder, which meant to say, Childine was lured over by this black cloak man, a person who was able to control 7th level advanced level mirage beasts. How powerful was he? But in the hands of this ordinary-looking young man, he was so easily subdued. Just at this moment, that black, cloaked man who was enveloped in flames emitted a gloomy and cold black chi. The surrounding 10 miles of air instantly congealed. It was as if even breathing was an eerie feeling. Hold your breaths. DMO Xian's cold and calm voice rang leisurely. His tone was emotionless as his vision shot towards the direction of the World Group's youngsters who were fighting bravely. Following that, the wind from his palm moved as it split that congealed air into half. Whereas this split gave the youngsters time to react. They speedily held their breaths as the actions of killing the magical beasts in their hands didn't stop. Yiqing Luo understood. That black-cloaked man released his profound en-chi to extinguish the profound fire which Immerse had congealed using his profound chi. The profound en-chi, which came from the dark forces, when released in this way, was poisonous. If these youngsters were to breathe it into their bodies, they would definitely be affected by the black chi. The look of Yi Qingling and Yu Qipeng being swallowed and controlled by the profound en-chi. Yiqing Luo still remembered it clearly. After the black gas on the black, cloaked man dissipated, he prepared to head towards the direction of Childine. Ignoring him, Immerse had already turned into a black shadow and stuck to the back of the black, cloaked man. That's enough. Just a few simple words were spat out from Immerse's mouth, and those youths whose faces were flushed red speedily started to pant heavily. However, from the beginning to the end, they had never cooperated with each other. This is what a team should be. Suddenly, someone beside him let out a sigh. The other members also followed that person's gaze and looked over. Instantly, his body stiffened and tensed up. Ever since the Blue Dragon Mercenary Group was established, they felt that they belonged to the same group. But after seeing the World Group's cooperation today, these group members finally understood what was called a team and what was called trust. Danger lurked in every corner, but they arranged for their men to disperse in an orderly manner. Moreover, they were extremely confident that their comrades would be able to obtain victory. They only went against their own target and wouldn't bother about the other target's actions, completely trusting their brothers. Every single one of them wasn't working hard for themselves, but for their brothers, for their team. Chapter 599. Outside the array barrier, those young figures were fighting bravely while bathed in blood. The ground was filled with magical beasts' corpses as blood flowed like a river. Their clothes had already been dyed red. Some belonged to the magical beasts, some belonged to them, and some belonged to their companions. Each and every one of them waved the weapons in their hands tirelessly. The way they cooperated well with each other to kill the magical beasts. Some were simple and violent, some were despicable and played dirty, and there were also, but no matter which one it was, their coordination rhythm would not be disrupted at all. Looking towards Yiqing Luo's side, it was even more exciting. The man who was facing Child En right in front didn't hold any weapon and just used his bare fist to resist all of Child Yin's attacks, attracting Child Yin's attention. He kept on shifting his body, and his speed was extremely fast, but it just so happened to control Child En completely within the attack range of his other brothers. While he was moving, he kept on trying to find Child Yin's Achilles heel. The most shocking thing was that pair of azure blue eyes and that expressionless face. Looking at the right side, that young man who was holding a gold coin dart in his hands. Every single time the gold coin dart was waved, no matter how fast Child Yin's speed was, it would definitely leave some traces on Child Yin's body. Whereas that young lady behind Child En had exquisite and sweet looks as her lips curled into a smile. But her hands were holding onto a pair of crescent moon-shaped sickles as she waved them around in an overbearing manner. She kept on shifting and leaping, maintaining herself behind Child En as she waved her sickles, chopping fiercely onto Child Yin's back. Standing on Child Yin's left was a pink-robed young lady, as petite as an 11 or 12-year-old child. She was leaping and shuttling around Child Yin's body. Her pink dress was like a pink pair of wings as the bells on her wrist gave off a crisp ringing sound. That Lolita's sweet, expressionless face was in a daze, without any expression at all. Those two pink furry balls on her long dress had now turned into 1,000 caddies' heavy iron hammer, becoming her weapon, and it could be retracted as she wished. It was obviously just an ornament, but when the furry ball swept past, it crashed into a thick and sturdy big tree, directly chopping that big tree into two. What shocked these group members the most was the lady standing in the air above Child En. She held a red feather fan in her hand, and every time she waved it, The feather fan would turn to blazing flames as profound chi was released, turning into thousands of sharp blades as they covered the sky and covered the earth as they shot toward Childine. Immediately after, numerous silver threads entangled Childine once again. There was a faint smile on her beautiful face from beginning to end. However, her pair of charming eyes reflected a piercingly cold light. Just a glance at them would cause one's entire body to tremble. The members of the Blue Dragon group suddenly understood why the youths were killing the demonic beasts on the 4th level, while they just stood by and watched. Because they were too strong. He was so powerful that he could easily kill those magical beasts with just a flick of his finger. They were using their own methods to train these youths. However, when they encountered truly powerful and dangerous giant beasts, they would directly resist them. Leader, I'm sorry. We have to join this battle. Leader, I'm a mercenary. I'm a real man. I can't let a woman destroy our Blue Dragon mercenary group. One by one, the group members stood up and walked out of the array barrier without even turning their heads back. No matter how exasperated Lanling Nuo was, no one turned their heads back. Jitsong Tian looked at those group members who were scolding hysterically as his brows kept twitching. Chapter 600. In an entire Blue Dragon mercenary group, there were only 20 over people left in the array barrier. Perhaps it was because they obeyed Jitsong Tian's orders, or perhaps they were afraid of the magical beasts outside the array barrier. Seeing that there were at least some members who obeyed his orders and stayed behind, Jitsong Tian's expression turned slightly gentler. The current Yiqing Luo's profound chi kept on gushing out as she stepped on the feather fan, releasing a strong airflow, confusing Child Yin's vision. Standing at a close distance on Child Yin's head, Yiqing Luo finally saw Child Yin's looks clearly. This Child Yin's name wasn't called out randomly. Instead, it was the huge face of this giant, illusory beast that clearly outlined the appearance of a child. An enlarged version of a child's looks. It had eyes, a mouth, and a nose, with distinct features. A pair of bronze bell-sized eyes, filled with a bloodthirsty, baleful aura. This kind of gaze, appearing on this 4 to 5-month-old child's face, was extremely strange. Qing Luo, this monster skin is rough, and our attacks don't cause much damage to it. After Qiao Jin shot out a gold coin dart, he raised his head and looked at Yiqing Luo, who was standing on top. This kind of battle of attrition, although the few of them's coordination wouldn't hurt themselves. But in the long run, their profound chi would eventually dry up. If their profound heart jade was unable to supply profound chi in time, they would not be able to maintain their current rhythm. They had already attrited for close to 1 hour, and their actions and attacks started to slow down. But Childine was still extremely ferocious as it attacked Long Yunjian at an extremely fast speed. Perhaps it had spent too much time, and Childine was already impatient from their harassment. Its bronze bell-like eyes became increasingly sinister and treacherous. This isn't a solution. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly. Her peripheral vision shot towards Dmo Xian's direction. She saw Dmo Xian floating in midair as he met that black, cloaked man's palms. Following that, the both of them retreated at the same time, and a burst of faintly discernible black chi started to spread out between their palms. Yiqing Luo's expression congealed. Profound yin chi. That black, cloaked man was still releasing energy from the dark forces during the battle. The other party was able to use profound yin chi freely. This person's status in the dark forces was absolutely not low. The most important thing now was Dmo Xian affected by the profound yin chi? The worst thing about fighting with someone from the dark forces was that the dark forces would release the mysterious yin chi during the fight. If one's temperament was unstable, they would definitely be affected by the mysterious yin chi. Although she had absolute confidence in Dmo Xian, she still couldn't help but worry. Following that, they saw Dmo Xian retreating a few steps as a ray of resplendent white light enveloped his entire body. The mass of black chi instantly vanished into nothingness. In this ball of white light, DMO Xian's peerless countenance was like the descent of a deity. "Sister!" There was a panicked cry, and then a small figure rushed over. Yiqing Luo's arm tightened as her body swiftly shifted to the side. Bang! Only to see Child Yin's muscular arm flashing past his eyes. Just a step's distance away, and this palm had already landed on Yiqing Luo. If Child Yin were to land a palm on him, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. When he turned his head, he saw a pair of eyes filled with worry. It was Li Mao. Chapter 601. After being reprimanded by Kitty Li, Yiqing Luo regained her senses as she gave Kitty Li a smile. "It's my fault. I've made you guys worried." DMO Xian, who was still in battle, also shot a worried gaze over. "Sister, Child Yin is not really invincible. All the beasts have their Achilles heel." Kitty Li puffed her cheeks, apparently still angry. But she knew that now wasn't the time to be angry. Kitty Li's lively eyes blinked. "Sister, I'll help you." Saying that, Kitty Li had already turned into a black remnant image. She arched her body, and like an agile kitten, she speedily shuttled around Child Yin. When Yiqing Luo heard that, she congealed her senses and raised the feather fan in her hands, adjusting her own rhythm as she launched a new round of attacks. High-level Mirage beasts also had their Achilles heel. No matter how strong Child Yin was, as long as they found its weak point, they would be able to target that point and deal with it. That black-cloaked man should be an extremely troublesome person. Even DMO Xian found it hard to deal with that person. No wonder that person was able to control 7th-level high-level Mirage beasts. The current her was to congeal to deal with Child Yin. She mustn't bring any burden to DMO Xian, and also mustn't let the world group's youngsters lose their confidence. Achilles heel. She would definitely be able to find it. Kitty Li's speed was extremely fast. She, who had a cat-beast physique in some aspects, was extremely similar to a cat. After a few somersaults and leaps, she had already arrived behind Child Yin. That slender, jade-like hand. In a blink of an eye, her nails became extremely long, sharp, and curved like hooks. That claw of hers grabbed onto Child Yin's tail without any hesitation. Child Yin, which was the size of a mountain, its tail was naturally as thick as a tree. After Kitty Li grabbed onto its tail, she used all her strength to pull it. Not too long later, Kitty Li's palm was filled with a pile of fur. Kitty Li's claw struck down, and that sharp hook pierced into Child Yin's flesh. Yiqing Luo was watching by the side as she shuddered. Oh my God! No wonder he was a beast human with cat-beast bloodline, to be able to change any part of his body into a beast race's form. A beast tail was indeed a fatal Achilles heel. But Child Yin's weak point didn't seem to be his tail. When Kitty Li's claws came down, Child Yin actually swung its tail and directly used its tail to lift Kitty Li's petite body up as it kept on swinging her around in midair. There were lush trees all around, and this fall naturally knocked into those trees. Luckily, Kitty Li was agile, and her claws grabbed onto Child Yin's tail as she climbed up agilely. Child Yin's tail swept across the trees, and the surroundings rumbled continuously. Not the tail. When a few of them saw that, they immediately increased the speed of their attacks, attempting to divert Child Yin's attention away from Kitty Li. After all, Kitty Li was just a little girl. Even if he was fast, nimble, and strong, he would not be able to withstand it. But in the eyes of Qiao Jin and the rest, Kitty Li was like a little sister. The few of them kept releasing their Xianqi. However, Child Yin only stared at Kitty Li, who was still sprawled on him. Although its tail was not its Achilles heel, compared to other parts of its body, it was its bottom line. This human, who was emitting a cat stench, not only used her claws to cut its tail, she even attempted to chop off its tail. How could Child Yin not only stare at Kitty Li, whereas to it, the others were merely tickling? Chapter 602. In a moment of desperation, she didn't aim at Child Yin's neck, but directly shot towards its eyes. The eyes were the weakest part of humans. Naturally, it was the weakest part of beasts. Yiqing Luo didn't believe that this Child Yin was so powerful that it could train its entire body into an impenetrable copper and iron wall. Child Yin's attention was focused on Kitty Li. It was because it was overly confident of itself, so, towards Yiqing Luo's attack, it had no reaction at all. Those strands of silver threads kept on revolving, like silver needles, as one after another shot directly into its copper bell-sized eyes. Roar, roar, roar. A sharp howl instantly reverberated throughout the entire magic beast forest. Yes, the entire magic beast forest was eerily cold, and because of this howl, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed violently. Blood spurted out from its eyes. Child Yin was in so much pain that it grimaced in pain as it raised its hand and broke those strands of silver threads which had pierced into its eyes. Child Yin's reaction was swift and it only got pierced in one eye, as it avoided the other eye's silver threads. While Child Yin was howling in pain, Kitty Li speedily leapt down from its body as she returned to Yiqing Luo's side. Roar, roar, roar. Roar. A fierce roar that was filled with raging anger rang out. That eye which was filled with blood was scarlet red. The other eye was also emitting scarlet fury. These people had completely infuriated it. The ground shook as the mountains shook. Following Child Yin's howl, those magical beasts which were battling with the other youngsters all started to howl as well. In a split second, the entire forest was filled with waves of magical beast howls. One after another, it was especially ear-piercing. Yiqing Luo's body, which was suspended in midair, suddenly swayed, as she almost fell down. She couldn't help but creased her brows tightly, as her slender hand covered her chest. A fishy sweetness surged up her throat, as though it was about to gush out from her mouth. Lass, circulate your profound jade heart's profound chi. Protect your heart meridians. By her ear, Old Man Song's anxious voice rang hazily. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath as her eardrums felt a piercing pain. Not only her, quite a few of the youths around him had already vomited blood from the howls of the magical beasts. These magical beasts were all mid to high-level magical beasts. Coupled with a high-level mirage beast, if they howled in unison, it would be easy for a low-level profound practitioner's internal organs to rupture and die from this howl. Brothers, protect your heart. Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief and reprimanded in her delicate voice. But after this howl, Yiqing Luo was like a puppet with a broken string, falling straight down from the sky. Fortunately, Kitty Li was by his side. As a beast man, she was not affected by the howls of the beasts. She speedily supported Yiqing Luo, and her hand, which had already returned to normal, gently placed on the back of Yiqing Luo's hand, which was pressing on her chest. Cat! Yiqing Luo was surprised. A warm feeling slowly flowed into Yiqing Luo's heart. That source wrapped around her heart and harmonized with her profound jade heart. The sharp pain in his eardrums and the sweet taste in his throat finally subsided. Just as Yiqing Luo heaved a sigh of relief, a scorching feeling suddenly arose in her heart, as though a raging fire was burning. Kitty Li, who was transferring her profound chi, suddenly retracted her hand, as though she was scalded, as she looked at her own palm in disbelief. It was still fair, but that scorching pain still remained in her palm. What was going on? Kitty Li stared at Yiqing Luo in astonishment, seeing her slender brows knitted into a bundle, as her delicate body kept twisting, as though she was in extreme pain. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.